Across the galaxy, species rise, fall, fight, adapt, and survive. Some are noble, some are monstrous, some reshape entire eras of galactic history. And in Season 2, we're diving even deeper, from the elegant Twi'leks and mysterious Kaminoans to the brutal legacy of the Taung, the relentless terror of the Ssi-ruuk, and the fanatical power of the Yuuzhan Vong. These 24 species aren't just background aliens. They are conquerors, creators, survivors, and legends. So strap in, because this journey spans the forests of Endor, the volcanic veins of Mustafar, the deep oceans of Manan, and the darkest corners of the unknown regions. This is Season 2 of Star Wars Alien Species. Let's begin. Ryloth is a planet of extremes, marked by turbulent seasons that march from its scorching deserts to its snowy wastes, passing through the lush intermediate temperature band where much of its population resides. The Twi'leks originated on Ryloth, but have become so ingrained in galactic society that far more of them can be found off-world. Twi'leks on Ryloth live everywhere, from the temperate zones where cities such as the capital of Asu lie, to sealed caves deep inside the desert mountains where blistering heat storms and armored predators, including the Twi'lek, cannot penetrate. Spaceports such as Lesu and Kalaun can accommodate most starships, but Twi'lek technology is not particularly advanced. Some off-worlders come to Ryloth to view the wind-suspended stones of the famous floating rock gardens, but most value only two things: slaves and spice. Ryloth has used slavery as its primary currency since the time of its entry into the Republic, circa 10,000 BBY. Twi'lek dancing girls are perennially popular, and their sale has long been tolerated by whatever government holds power on Coruscant. Mineral blooms of Ryle spice are found in abundance on Ryloth, and its mining and trafficking fuel the planet's shadowy economy. Although Ryloth sits on the outer rim leg of the Corellian Run, little of its spice travels that public route. More common is the back door of the Deathwind Corridor, pushing through the cloak of the Sith and linking Ryloth to Rune. The inhabitants of Ryloth traditionally avoid taking a stand on any issue. "One cannot defeat a heat storm, one must ride it," is a favorite proverb. During the Clone Wars, Twi'lek politicians on Coruscant affirmed their loyalty to the Republic, even as other Twi'leks kept negotiations open with the Separatists. This delicate dance collapsed when a Separatist army invaded the system, subjecting it to a brutal occupation. The Twi'leks fared better than other alien species under Imperial rule, always finding a new angle to improve their lot. Ryloth took on galactic importance in 6 AB when it provided the Ryle stock needed to synthesize a cure for the Krytos virus. In 24 ABY, Twi'lek firebrand Nola Tarkana seized control of Ryloth and made it the headquarters of the Diversity Alliance, her anti-human political movement. Cooler heads soon prevailed, and the planet maintained an intentionally low profile during the Yuuzhan Vong and Imperial Sith Wars. Ryloth has a diameter of 10,600 kilometers. Its day is 19 standard hours, and it has a year of 305 standard days. It has a population of 1.5 billion. Its sentient species is obviously the Twi'leks, with a species mix of 76% Twi'lek and 24% other. Languages spoken: Twi'leki, or Rylothian, Leku, Basic. They are a feudal meritocracy, and they export Ryle spice and slaves, and import foodstuffs, medicine, and technology. Twi'leks are tall, generally thin humanoids indigenous to the Ryloth star system in the Outer Rim. Their most notable features are their tentacle head tails, called both Leku and Chin Chun, that protrude from the back of their skull, distinguishing them from the multitude of other species found across the known galaxy. These fatty, tapered, prehensile growths serve both sensual and cognitive functions, including the storing of memories. In fact, some of the records located from the Old Republic era indicate that this storage capacity allowed the Jedi Aayla Secura to recall her Jedi training after her memories were stolen from her. In conversation, Twi'leks will often refer to their leku individually, Chin meaning right leku and Chun meaning left leku. Twi'leks' smooth skin comes in many variations of blue, red, yellow, orange, deep green, and even striped. Sharp, claw-like nails punctuate their long, flexible fingers, and their orange or yellow eyes are especially good for seeing in the dark. Ryloth is a dry, rocky world with a particular orbit that has resulted in half of the planet becoming a barren, unlivable desert, where the sun's rays constantly scorch the surface. The other side is always trapped in frigid darkness. Most of Ryloth's indigenous species inhabit the cold, dark portion of the planet, while the Twi'leks live in cities carved out of the mountains in the twilight section of the world, where the temperature is somewhat comfortable. Theirs is a primitive industrial civilization based on windmills and air-spun turbines that provide power for heat, light, air circulation, and minor industry within their city complexes. Frequently, hot air blows from the sun-based regions, referred to as heat storms. These winds drive the turbines and windmills. The dry twisters can reach temperatures in excess of 300 degrees Celsius, with gusts hitting 500 kilometers per hour. While very dangerous, they provide the warmth necessary to sustain life. Twi'leks are omnivorous, cultivating edible molds and fungi, and raising bovine crids for food and clothing, while their ancestors might have been hunters who struck out upon the frosty plains to find game for sustenance. Present-day Twi'leks have developed a more agrarian society. The Twi'lek people are highly intelligent, capable of learning and speaking most galactic languages. Their own dialect combines verbal sounds and subtle movements of their leku to communicate complete concepts. Even the most advanced linguists have difficulty interpreting all the head-tail movements inherent to the Twi'lek language. For this reason, when two Twi'leks converse in public, their discussion often remains completely private, unless it is observed by another Twi'lek or a quality protocol droid. This linguistic feature has been the cause of much suspicion on the part of many outsiders throughout history, particularly Imperials, who believed that since Twi'leks sent secret signals with their headtails, they were duplicitous spies. In truth, Twi'leks see their leku as spiritual appendages, and in jostling them, they express the movement of inner divinity. While this may indeed be considered extra communication, it is actually contact at a metaphysical level. While the meaning is mostly private between speakers, it is usually not two-faced or deceitful to those outside the communication, unless absolutely necessary. Normally it is merely truthful and real, and cannot go against their verbal expression, not, at least without extreme concentration. Recent studies done by the Jedi of the New Republic found that Twi'leks are in fact a generally force-sensitive people, and that their leku interaction is tied to their inherent force sensitivity. This may also explain some of their suspect treatment at the hands of the Empire. Contrary to the paranoia expressed by the Empire, the people of Ryloth are not at all warlike and remained clear of the Imperial conflict during the Galactic Civil War, although if they had been called upon to spy for either side, they would have been quite good at it. They prefer cunning and slyness over physical confrontation. Hidden beneath the surface of their world, their city complexes are massive, interconnecting networks of catacombs and chambers. Built in rocky outcroppings, they blend right in with the environment of the planet, vivid evidence of this people's subtle nature. Each of their cities is autonomous and governed by a head clan consisting of 5 Twi'lek males who collectively direct industry and trade. These leaders are born to their positions and exercise absolute power. When one member of the head clan dies, the remaining 4 are driven out to follow their colleague to the Bright Lands, making room for the next generation. If there is no immediate generation to follow, a set of regents takes over until a new head clan can be selected. Given that a seat within the head clan is handed down within families, intra- and inter-clan rivalries abound. Subterfuge in one's own clan is almost to be expected, although Twi'leks who are caught and disgraced among their people are also driven into the Bright Lands. Because Twi'leks possess no spacefaring capabilities of their own, they have grown dependent on neighboring systems, as well as on pirates, smugglers, and merchants for much of their galactic interaction. One of their greatest exports is the mineral ryle, which is used in many medicines, but also as an expensive and addictive recreational drug. Ryloth has become very vulnerable to the underbelly of the galaxy life. Slaving vessels have often combed the planet to stock their thriving ryle stores, while smugglers often raid ryle storehouses. Some head clans have actually given their own people into slavery as a protection payment, feeling threatened by the possibility of widespread pillaging. Slavery has historically been a serious problem among the Twi'lek clans, particularly for their female members. In traditional Twi'lek society, women are expected to be subservient to men and are often treated as afterthoughts or accessories. They are not considered particularly intelligent or capable, having value only to the degree that they please others. Twi'lek women were commonly sold into slavery, even by their own clans, to become dancers or companions, as their beauty and grace is favored galaxy-wide by many different species. Lethan, or red-skinned, Twi'lek women fetch a startlingly high price on the open market. With the dawn of the New Republic, some head clans on Ryloth banded together to stop the slave trade and protect one another from the retribution of angry smugglers and traders. This has created a much safer environment, and more legitimate trading organizations have started to bring business to the world. Following this, Twi'leks began to take on a visible and influential role in the New Republic, often serving as pilots, as advocates, and in other positions. This new prominence was almost jeopardized when the rogue Imperial warlord Zinj brainwashed Twi'leks into attempting to assassinate Admiral Akbar and Republic hero Wedge Antilles. Following this, all Twi'leks were temporarily removed from active military duty until the plot was discovered. Thankfully, before it could reach its conclusion, the Twi'lek species was vindicated and returned to its former level of influence in galactic affairs. The forest moon of Endor is a small green sphere, the second of 9 moons orbiting a silver-banded gas giant, known to its native Ewoks as Tana. Reports that the gas giant vanished in a cataclysm are false, and have become known as the Endor Moon hoax. The forest moon has lighter than standard gravity and an ecosystem bursting with life, including 3 native sentient species. The forest moon is also home to castaways. Local space is plagued by hyperspace anomalies that have wrecked starships from nearby Sanyasa and Zorbia, as well as transports belonging to starhoppers hailing from far-off ports. The Ewoks, the forest moon's most famous residents, are meter-high ursine omnivores who dwell in giant trees. Their technology is primitive, but the Ewoks are sound engineers and cunning warriors, as a legion of Imperial troops discovered during the Battle of Endor. In the time of the New Republic, a few Ewoks have sought their fortunes elsewhere in the galaxy, serving as starship gunners and learning somewhat squeaky basic. The peaceable Yuuzhan dwell on the plains and the forest floor, and are known for their long legs, highly developed vocal cords, and keen ears. They make superb singers, and some, including the Max Rebo band's Joe Yawaza, have made careers for themselves with bands. The Goraks are often considered legends, but they exist. Fortunately, these vicious, semi-sentient giants are quite rare. Visited only by castaways, fugitives, and pilgrims before the Battle of Endor, the forest moon was home to Alliance forces for a time after Emperor Palpatine died on the second Death Star overhead. Nagai invaders chased the rebels off the moon, but they were followed by traders, intelligence agents, miners, souvenir hunters, and even tour groups. Endor was so remote, however, that interest proved fleeting. 15 years after the Alliance's great victory, only one small trading post connected the forest moon with the rest of the galaxy. It has a diameter of 4,900 kilometers. It has a day of 18 standard hours and a year of 402 standard days. It has an unknown population size. Sentient species are the Ewoks and Yuuzhan, and it is 95% Ewok, 4% Yuuzhan, and 1% other. Languages spoken: Ewokese, Yuuzhan, Sanyasin, and Basic. They have a tribal government. They export medicinal goods and foodstuffs, and they import nothing? Ewoks are small, fur-covered ursine beings who inhabit the forest moon of Endor, an outer rim world circling a gas giant system near the area of the galaxy known as the Unknown Regions. While Imperial propaganda depicted them as having been wiped out after the Battle of Endor, the intelligent, primitive Ewoks still live in sizable communities in their wooded home, a lush environment alive with thick vegetation and myriad forms of wildlife. The world's low axial tilt and its regular orbit around the gas giant create a temperate climate for most of the moon, and 300-meter-tall trees cover many regions and are central to the landscape. For this reason, they are significant to Ewok culture and religion. Though Ewoks suffer from limited eyesight, these small creatures have an excellent sense of smell that more than compensates. They are accomplished hunters, and, being omnivores, they also gather food from the plants that surround them. In some cases, they have been known to mistakenly eat sentient beings, assuming they were simply large game to be captured. However, they can usually be convinced to put away their cooking implements after some conversation and a little bit of luck. While they forage and hunt, Ewoks are extremely alert and easily startled. Many carnivorous creatures inhabit the forest moon, and thus Ewoks are always prepared for an attack. Some researchers have noted that they seem to possess a sixth sense, the ability to perceive threats to their community far in advance. It has been likened to some Jedi Force talents, although only a few Ewoks have shown the ability to truly manipulate this mysterious power. Ewoks are curious, good-natured creatures who value community, family, and friendship. Their culture is gender-based, with the males serving as hunters, warriors, chieftains, and shamans, and the females acting as gatherers and domestics, rearing and educating their young. Music and dancing are part of everyday life. In fact, Ewoks use music to communicate with other villages via rhythmic drum beats. As news echoes throughout the ancient trees, it imbues their environment with an aura of extra life. Though their culture is rich in historic lore, art, and music, Ewoks are primitive, wearing only hoods adorned with bones and feathers for decoration and to indicate status in the community. They learn quickly, however, and when exposed to technology, they will figure it out easily, sometimes after an initial bout of jitters and mistakes. Few have yet ventured into space, and when they do, it is typically by tagging along with star pilots or crews that visit their planet. Among these few are a select number who have learned modern technology enough to be useful on space crews. Ewoks have developed no technology of their own, beyond standard woodworking tools and rudimentary weapons. But they possess a flair for invention with their primitive resources, creating traps and snares that can be highly effective even against great technological threats. Their ingenuity was key to the Rebel Alliance's defeat of the Empire at the Battle of Endor, and if given leave to explore and learn the ways of technology, they will frequently become adept. The language of this species is expressive yet simple, and can be learned and spoken by humans. Because the verbal nuances are similar, Ewoks can also learn to speak several human languages, and through their exposure to more and more off-worlders since the Battle of Endor, many homebound Ewoks have taken to speaking to visitors in a pidgin form of Ewok Basic. Ewoks live in tribal clusters in villages built of mud, thatch, and wood, normally suspended several levels above the forest floor. Located at the center of the villages are the largest structures, including the home of the tribal chief, with the dwellings of tribe members arranged in clusters at the outskirts. Intricate walkways serve to join together residences, and village squares and stairs, rope ladders, and swinging vines help the Ewoks to get quickly from the forest floor to their homes in the trees. Some Ewoks also reside on Endor's lakes, in floating villages constructed on stilts. Ewoks are frequently attacked by angry flogs, the giant Gorak, and the fearsome Duloks because of their small size, so they are often very hesitant about venturing into new territory or leaving their villages unguarded. Ewok people are suspicious and cautious, yet fierce fighters, brave and loyal to their tribe. This is also evidenced in their religion, which emphasizes the importance of home, family, and the trees surrounding them. A new tree is planted for each Ewok at birth, and is considered that being's life tree. Ewoks believe that their spirits pass into these trees when they die. Moreover, Ewoks regard these trees as their guardians, and in times of crisis, the tribal leaders will commune with the oldest and wisest trees, seeking guidance. The trees, they believe, are intelligent, long-lived beings who watch over them, and in a reciprocal manner they must safeguard the trees. This belief was one of the main reasons that they aided the rebels in their fight against the Empire, as they felt that the Empire posed a threat to every aspect of their environment. War is not common among the Ewoks, however. Although they exist in tribes and remain fiercely loyal to them, Ewoks will greet other tribes with warmth and goodwill as long as they act with honor and respect. They will even accept outsiders into their tribe if the visitors demonstrate a familial loyalty to them, if the strangers haven't already been mistaken for dinner. Although, as skilled at building weaponry as they are at constructing their elaborate villages, arms are mainly kept handy to defend against outside threats rather than against one another. Because religion is so important to Ewok society, the village shaman governs a tribe side by side with the ruling chieftain. The shaman interprets signs to guide the chieftain in his decisions, and their belief system includes references to a living energy similar to the Force that feeds the trees and likewise strengthens and guides the Ewoks.
You will be delighted to hear that we are on schedule. 200,000 units are ready, with 1 million more well on the way.
Kamino. Given Kamino's role in starting the Clone Wars and aiding the rise of Emperor Palpatine, it's safe to say that no planet with such a low profile has ever wielded such massive influence. Technically, Kamino isn't part of the galaxy. It circles a star high above the galactic disk, loosely grouped with other fringe stars at the lower periphery of the Rishi Maze. Kamino was once largely landlocked, with eels and Thisspiasians choking its narrow oceans and sleek-skinned mammals inhabiting the marshes of the low-lying continents. From this stock arose the Kaminoans, long-necked humanoids exhibiting effortless grace on land and in water. Kaminoans developed their planet's coasts, their triumph being the parapet city of Derum. Circa 19,000 BBY, abrupt climatic change melted Kamino's glacial reserves. Within 2 centuries, every landmass sat beneath hundreds of meters of seawater, including Derum and architectural treasures such as the clock spires of Hirai Nova. The Kaminoans lived on. Technology allowed them to move into water-shedding stilt cities, and the science of genetics permitted the preservation of many drowned species through controlled cloning. Genetic engineering soon shaped the Kaminoans themselves, as their pursuit of perfection resulted in near uniformity of thought, appearance, and mannerism. Ambitious parties from the Republic sought out Kamino as early as 4500 BBY. Kamino cloning proved far superior to the common Lyrian techniques, and the laboratories of Tipoca City soon filled orders both local, the shovel-handed miners of Subterrel, and distant, the blind berserkers of the unknown region's Leech Legion. Kaminoans also stocked their own pond, modifying Naboo's soaring Awas to withstand Kamino's crashing surf. In 32 BB, Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas hired the Kaminoans to build a clone army for the Republic, though Darth Sidious guided the project to completion. Sidious even arranged the planet's deletion from stellar databases to ensure the project's secrecy. The vat-grown army lent its name to the Clone Wars from 22 to 19 BBY, during which time Kamino came under attack from both the Separatists and the Mandalorians. The end of the war saw Kamino transformed into a fortified Imperial possession dedicated to expanding the Stormtrooper Corps. In 12 BBY, a clone uprising orchestrated by disgruntled Kaminoan clone masters met a swift end at the hands of the 501st Legion. The collapse of the Empire in 4 ABY triggered an economic collapse on Kamino. As more than 2 decades of clone production came to an end, the world continues to survive on smaller contracts, often for warlords and gangsters. Its diameter is 19,270 kilometers. It has 27 standard hours in a day and 463 standard days in a year. It has a population of 1 billion Kaminoans. It is 100% Kaminoan. They speak Kaminoan. They are governed by a ruling council, and they export clones, covert technology, and military hardware, and they import foodstuffs. Kaminoans are thin, towering, pale-skinned humanoids who inhabit the little-known water-covered world of Kamino on the edge of wild space. They have long, graceful appendages, and their oblong heads sit atop slender, elongated necks. Their large, dark eyes enable them to see into the ultraviolet spectrum, and their tiny mouths are perfectly suited for the small amount of food they consume. Female Kaminoans are completely bald, while their male counterparts bear a unique head crest. When a severe shift in global temperatures caused the ending of a planetary ice age, flooding their world, the Kaminoans chose extreme methods to survive. They developed an exacting, detailed scientific method for cloning their own species and enacted selective breeding to adapt their race to the changing environment through the elimination of weaknesses. As such, they are one of the most genetically homogeneous species in the known galaxy, having controlled variation from one Kaminoan to another. This is not to suggest that there is perfect genetic replication, but rather that the Kaminoans utilize a cloning process that produces children within a strict, predetermined set of genetic parameters. Scientists are therefore greatly regarded and given high places of honor in society. Those who are most respected will literally wear a sign of their hierarchical placement on their sleeves. Black cuffs are an indication of those who have earned esteem. The thicker the cuff, the higher the rank of the individual. Kaminoans initially evolved from a species of marsh-dwelling amphibians who were focused on their communities at the suppression of individual expression. The early Kaminoans trained their young for specific tasks to serve the greater good of their people, and this communal focus has remained. While Kaminoans control their genetic codes, they also allow their children to develop their own interests and select careers of their choice within a community-approved set of parameters. The cloning process is designed to ensure sufficient numbers for each niche of society, as not all Kaminoans are employed in the cloning industry. Because of their past struggle to survive and the Kaminoan cultural mindset toward ending genetic weaknesses through selective breeding, the Kaminoans have developed an unspoken intolerance for physical frailty or imperfection in other species. While they are polite and gentle in their manner to outsiders, they cannot understand the tendency for most non-Kaminoans to maintain a lineage that includes any genetic imperfection. They feel all species that continue down such a pathway are inferior and deserving of eventual elimination. This attitude extends to all their cloning projects, wherein they will monitor creations for any irregularities in biochemistry, subjecting deviant clones to extensive conditioning to correct their aberrations. In keeping with their commitment to flawlessness, they have also developed methods of extreme sterilization so that clones are not spoiled with any defects. That they can keep such a large operation immaculate is considered a remarkable feat. The Kaminoans work and dwell in huge floating cities that appear white and sparse to the naked human eye, yet all their architecture construction are actually decorated in the ultraviolet spectrum. They use cloned Ewoks for transportation between these floating cities. Even though Kaminoans have eliminated most of their weaknesses, they keep their living and working areas at a perpetual temperate climate, as they find the extreme temperatures of the outside world terribly uncomfortable, particularly high heat and bright sunlight. They prefer Kamino's autumn, when the skies never clear and a light rain is constantly falling. Kaminoans also have a deep respect for their origins, and the lessons learned from the catastrophe that changed their planet are continually reinforced. The cities in which Kaminoans originated now lie deep beneath Kamino's oceans, and they do not permit that environment to be disturbed, instead maintaining the ruins as sacred sites for pilgrimages. The Kaminoans are relatively unknown throughout the galaxy at large, as they are not a species to travel beyond their home system. However, among those who are familiar with them, they are regarded as the greatest and most skilled producers of cloning technology. It was the Kaminoans who designed the cloned human soldiers, who would later become the Grand Army of the Republic, and eventually serve the Empire. Despite their own prejudices, Kaminoans are forced to maintain some contact with the outside galaxy in order to trade for raw materials and technologies that they require to sustain their highly advanced society. As a result, Kaminoans speak Basic in addition to their native language. Unlike other societies, they have not made any attempts to explore the possibility of undersea mining to obtain the materials they need, likely feeling it would only distract them from their primary focus on trade. Their products have always chiefly depended on their cloning science, which has supported them for generations, including times when they have quietly created armies of workers and soldiers for other cultures. Because Kaminoans have little compassion or feeling for beings other than themselves, they have no qualms about the questionable ethics of their cloning work. Instead, they are proud of their genetic accomplishments, never taking into account the possible consequences. While the Kaminoans were creating clones for the Grand Army of the Republic, they were also secretly designing a small clone force for their own protection. Approximately 10 years before the destruction of the first Death Star, Kamino attempted to secede from the Empire in a battle that saw clone fighting clone, with the great bounty hunter Boba Fett taking part on the Imperial side. The Kaminoans were defeated. Utilizing Boba Fett's knowledge of the facility, the Imperials destroyed the Kaminoan cloning equipment, preventing the species from ever again creating its own army. Large numbers of fleeing Kaminoans were shot down and killed as they attempted to leave the planet. However, a small contingent of cloners were forcibly relocated to Coruscant, and as a result their cloning technology survived through a good deal of the Imperial era. After the Kaminoan insurrection, the Emperor ordered that clones would from then on be designed from multiple templates so that they would not be so easily corrupted against his new order. However, the 501st Legion, the elite group of stormtroopers known as Vader's Fist, continued as a homogeneous entity based on the template provided by Jango Fett, as they were produced in the Coruscant facility, staffed by kidnapped Kaminoans. It wasn't until later years that non-Jango members were accepted into the ranks of the 501st. It is unclear whether the Kaminoans were able to re-establish their own cloning facilities on their homeworld, though there have been various reports that some Kaminoan cloning technology may have been smuggled off-world to be sold to the highest bidders. Khom, located on the southern edge of the deep core. This planet is blessed with wide seas, blue in color, large land masses, and ample oxygen. The Khomite people call this world home. There were also beasts called Khomite Striders, which the Khommites controlled through cloning, much like themselves. Throughout the Clone Wars, Khom was loyal to the Republic, although the planet had difficulty with wartime cloning restrictions. Khom was attacked in 12 AB by Admiral Dalla in retaliation of the actions of Dorsk 81 and Kip Durin. This devastated the population, and these obstinate people had to do something that they were not accustomed to doing: adapting. Hell City was a major city, and like other cities on Khom, was laid out via a mathematically perfect grid. It housed a cloning facility. As of 25 ABY, 100 million to 500 million Khommites call Khom home, and they speak Khom and Basic. Khommites are a people of near-human status. By 1000 BBY, they had surpassed the rest of the galaxy in cloning, which led them to believe they had achieved perfection, making a society that lay stagnant for centuries, if not a millennia. They only continued the population by way of cloning. Due to cloning for centuries, they were unable to reproduce in natural ways. They were only able to eat processed food wafers. Force sensitivity was among the traits the Khommites considered undesirable and did their very best to eradicate it from their clones. But their efforts were ultimately in vain, as Dorsk 81 became a Jedi Knight at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Praxium. They were a rigid people who viewed anything outside their norm as a threat.
To walk the path of the Jedi, one's spirit must be strong. That requires discipline.
To Thisspias, a planet located in the Farstay sector in the expansion region. The snake people, Thisspiasians, called this temperate world home. They were a monarchy with a democratically elected parliament. Thisspias joined the Republic early on in its history. During Darth Revan's time, the planet was in the borders of his Sith Empire. Thisspias had renowned warriors and even had Jedi, like Oppo Rancisis. At the time of the Clone Wars, Thisspias sided neither with the Republic or CIS. The Galactic Empire bombarded the planet and held its serpentine denizens in thraldom. The Empire imprisoned the Crowned Prince, who had to be liberated by the rebellion. Following the Battle of Endor, Thisspias was plagued with a bloody civil war, with the Blood Monarch returning to power at the end. By 12 years after the Battle of Yavin, it was a member of the New Republic and was among the worlds conquered by the Yuuzhan Vong during their invasion. Thisspiasian. Thisspiasians are a reptilian species from Thisspias, a world located in the expansion region of the galaxy. They can be clearly distinguished from other reptiles because of their upper body appears to be humanoid, typically covered in long flowing hair that emanates from their head and face. The lower half, however, is serpentine, wrapped in scales similar in color to their hair. Their 2 sets of hands contain 5 fingers that end in sturdy elongated claws. It is believed that Thisspiasians have 4 hands as a result of their evolution from quadruped reptiles. However, for many Thisspiasians, the smaller lower set of vestigial arms and hands do not have the strength or dexterity of their larger upper set. In fact, most upper-class Thisspiasians have taken to wearing voluminous robed garments that hide their second set of limbs completely by omitting a second set of sleeves and incorporating a wide belt-like sash. In addition, many Thisspiasians go as far as to use hidden apparatuses to bind their lower arms to their bodies. Among this group of Thisspiasians, it is considered unseemly or unsophisticated to publicly show the lower limbs. Physiological studies suggest that over the generations, this may be the cause of the lower limbs' weakness due to continued biological adaptation. It has been demonstrated that among the working classes, lower limbs do not show a similar muscle weakness. Their prehensile tails give Thisspiasians the capability of carrying heavy objects, freeing up their hands to perform other functions. This makes the species even more effective when they are in combat, as well-trained Thisspiasian warriors may strike out with their tails as well as their hands. There is one particular Thisspiasian trait that other species frequently find a little unnerving, and that is their preference for eating their food live. Like their snake-like ancestors, Thisspiasians principally dine on small, live animals such as rodents, birds, and bugs. While they are omnivorous, consuming their fair share of vegetables, a Thisspiasian feast would not be complete without several cages of tiny species from around the galaxy being placed in the center of the table. After dipping a treat in several sauces containing various seasonings, a Thisspiasian's jaw unhinges at the joint, allowing the mouth to widen and take in the animal's whole. As they've come to be in the presence of more and more off-world species who do not share their enthusiasm for squirming meals, many Thisspiasians have taken to eating cooked food for the benefit of companions and guests of other traditions, though they have been known to state with certainty that such food is lacking in zesty flavor. One other prominent reptilian trait is carried on through the Thisspiasian genes, the tendency to shed their skin every few years. Unlike snakes, however, Thisspiasians will not slip out of their outer layer of skin in one piece. To ease the process of shedding and to make the progression less noticeable when in the presence of outsiders, they will lubricate their skin with sweet-smelling oils and salves, peeling off the dead membrane in portions during their daily private grooming sessions. A race of ancient warriors, the Thisspiasians have perfected a culture bent on taming their most savage emotions. When the Old Republic was forming, they eagerly joined the fledgling government, aiding it in overcoming threats both internal and external. They are perceived as being calm, wise, and dispassionate, and yet they commonly manage this through several hours a day of intense meditation. Average Thisspiasians meditate for 5 to 6 standard hours per day. Otherwise, they can become moody and irrational. Because they spend so much time in meditation, they only require about 2 actual hours of sleep per standard day. One of the best examples of Thisspiasian mental discipline was displayed by the Old Republic Jedi Master, Oppo Rancisis. Combining the natural mental abilities of his species with his Jedi training, Rancisis specialized in Jedi battle meditation. He was able to formulate complex and near unbeatable battle plans and direct his forces over great distances. His murder at the hands of the fallen Jedi Sora Bulk was a blow to the Republican forces that they were hard-pressed to overcome. The Thisspiasian homeworld is ruled by an absolute leader known as the Blood Monarch. This position is carried on through the bloodline, and it has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Although a democratically elected parliament handles much of the legislation on the planet, as with most monarchies, a portion of the populace is of the opinion that the leadership is corrupt, degenerate, and tied to archaic customs that no longer apply to their modern way of life. During the waning years of the Old Republic, Master Rancisis inherited the role of Blood Monarch over his homeworld, which he rejected in favor of remaining with the Jedi Order. When Count Dooku threatened the Republic with his separatist movement, Rancisis asked the standing monarch to help in the struggle against the separatists. Per species tradition, Rancisis had to best the monarch in unarmed combat to have his boon granted. When the Blood Monarch lost to Rancisis, he agreed to lend warriors to several battles. When the Empire ultimately came to power, Thisspias was bombarded by Imperial warships, and its people were conquered and enslaved. Eager to please the Emperor, an overzealous Imperial governor assassinated the Blood Monarch and imprisoned the Crown Prince. The outraged Thisspiasians rebelled, but their insurrection was quickly subdued by the Imperial's superior firepower. Not long afterward, rebel spies infiltrated the Imperial troops' headquarters on Thisspias and freed the prince. Humiliated, the governor threatened the Thisspiasians with annihilation, but he was eliminated by the Emperor's hand before he could enact his threats. The hand had been sent to punish the governor for his failure to hold the Thisspiasian heir. The world was then placed under military quarantine, though several Thisspiasians slipped out to join the ranks of the rebel alliance. Following the Battle of Endor, the Crown Prince of Thisspias returned to reclaim his throne. When he did, he found himself rebuffed, as a vocal portion of his people were declaring their desire for a more democratic government. This confrontation incited a brief, yet extremely bloody civil war, wherein the Blood Monarch was returned to power. During the years of the New Republic and the subsequent Galactic Alliance, the people of Thisspias have become convinced that the monarchy has evolved very little, remaining tied to its decadent lifestyle and largely antiquated ancient political traditions. Ssi-ruuk, located in the Galactic cluster in the Outer Rim territories. Home to the Weequay species, this planet was on a key position of the Scizar Run, an important space lane connecting Hutt space with the rest of the Outer Rim. The planet had 5 moons. Arid in climate, with deserts, volcanoes, and acidic seas, it was nearly self-sufficient due to a productive agricultural sector. The planet has vast quantities of copper, but they are barely touched. This planet was located in Hutt space. Around 282 years before the Battle of Yavin, it was colonized by a group of Huk, which the Weequay resented. This led to war between the two species, lasting until the Galactic Empire. Ssi-ruuk was invaded by the Yuuzhan Vong in 26 ABY, and the Weequay were enslaved. The bad hand dealt to the Weequay continued, as the planet was included in Darth Krayt's empire. Weequay. Weequays are a humanoid species from the desert world of Ssi-ruuk, located in the system of the same name. They are a strong, rugged people with countenances weathered by the harsh desert winds. Their skin is coarse and gnarled, and typically black, gray, brown, or tan in color. The males wear top knots drawn to the peak of their otherwise bald heads, while the females usually shave their skulls completely. Male Weequays, who are off-planet, wear individual top knot braids for each Ssi-ruuk year that they are not at home. When they return to Sri-Lur, they shave off the top knot braids in celebration. In keeping with their rough appearance, Weequay have a unique resilience to injury from blunt trauma and burns. Their skeletal frames are more dense than those of most humanoid races, and their skin is more like a tough hide. A Weequay's skin can withstand blaster fire and attacks from blunt weapons with little injury, though, at close range, a blaster will cause their skin to smolder. Average knife attacks are also ineffective, though a vibroblade can puncture their skin. It is not resistant to lightsabers, however. This natural body armor makes them extremely durable fighters in close quarters and renders them very desirable as personal guards to organized crime figures and the like. Often seen as threatening, Weequays will not usually speak in the presence of a non-Weequay, instead often hiring a trustworthy non-Weequay to speak for them. In fact, they do not talk much at all, even in the presence of their own people. This is largely because they possess a type of pheromone-based communication that enables members of the same clan to communicate in complete silence. This type of interaction is as clear to the species as the spoken word, but it works only with other clan members. These people are indeed dangerous. Theirs is a complex, impersonal, brutal culture centered on the worship of a multitude of gods that symbolize both natural forces and animals. Their primary deity is Quay, the god of the moon, from whom their people's name is derived. Weequay means, literally, follower of Quay. To contact their gods, Weequays use totems that symbolize the sphere of control of each given deity. Their main totem is a spherical object that they utilize for obtaining advice from Quay himself. They address the totem as Quay in an effort to please the god. This totem actually behaves much like a child's toy, and on other worlds it has found use as an amusement device. All Weequays carry one on their person, and will shake it and wait for advice or inspiration to appear, directing them in every important decision they must make. They have a great devotion for the totem, and will grow violently angry if anyone questions the validity of an answer derived from it. The Quay totem produces its own problems, however, as Weequays may shake the object for hours seeking the answers they wish to receive. But in doing this, they will remain patient, assuming that because all Weequays have totems, the god was probably busy answering the questions posed by others. The totem also controls Weequay mating. When a male Weequay wishes to take a female as a mate, he questions the totem first as to whether it is a wise idea. If the totem answers in the affirmative, he seeks out the prospective female, who in turn consults her own totem. This process may go around several times until the two have matching answers. In a like manner, Weequays can also end a marriage by consulting the totem. The only part of Weequay life not truly determined by the totem is the producing of children, which the species leaves up to chance, accepting offspring as a special secret present from the gods, though many Weequays still, out of eagerness, ask Quay to tell them the gender and number of children to be born. While they do take great pride in their offspring, life in a Weequay clan is completely impersonal, and clan members do not even have names, since individuality is not a concept they understand. They will only take a name when they leave their homeworld. Weequays employ limited technology, though they are known as skilled makers of melee weapons, such as force pikes. Weequays were originally a nomadic, desert-dwelling people, but eventually they established large clan cities in coastal areas of Sri-Lur. At the center of these cities are religious shrines called Thal, made of black polished stone, where followers known as Sant can leave anonymous offerings. Building Thal off-planet is not allowed, although Weequays who are not on Sri-Lur may sacrifice a strong animal or adversary to the gods. Such traditional religious sacrifices can often attract unwanted attention from local peoples, as occurred on at least one occasion on Tatooine. Weequay guards and mercenaries in the employ of the crime lord Jabba the Hutt had taken to slaughtering considerable numbers of banthas in their rituals. However, some of these banthas were the bonded mounts of Tusken Raiders, who were angered at the death of their beloved animals. Although the Tusken Raiders could not prove the Weequays were to blame, Jabba kept the peace by making it appear as if the local humans were behind the deaths. While it might seem incongruous, there have been Weequay Jedi. Sora Bulk, was a well-known Jedi at the time of the Clone Wars, even though his own people would not have been able to identify him by name. While the rest of his species relied on their Quay totems to guide their lives, Sora, raised in the tradition of the Jedi from infancy, saw them as little more than gambling baubles in comparison to the Force. Private notes recorded by Bulk were discovered in Jedi holocrons in the years following the rise of the new Jedi Order. In these, Bulk stated a firm belief that a good number of his people held the potential for Jedi training, but were hopelessly inhibited by their cultural mores. While Bulk might have worked to bring his species to a higher level of development, during the Clone Wars he unfortunately fell under the influence of the dark side before he was ultimately slain by the Jedi Quinlan Vos. Other Weequay Jedi played an important part during the Clone Wars. Q-Mars Radath Gom served faithfully during the final years of the Galactic Republic. He was killed in the Battle of Geonosis in the Petronaki Arena. Cossix, a female Weequay, was a Jedi Master who served at the Battle of Kamino as a star pilot. Because they were raised apart from their people, all of these Jedi demonstrated independence from traditional reliance on the Quay totem that has so engaged their people. Sadly, this has made their memory largely unaccepted by the Weequay populace. Coruscant. Hundreds of millennia before the Alliance to restore the Republic fought the Galactic Empire, two races warred on ancient Coruscant, known then as Norton. The Taung and the Zell, who serve as the ancestors of humans. During the war, the battalions of Zell fought the Taung at Great Zell, a city. A volcanic eruption led to the Taung winning the battle as the ash blocked out the sun. This led them to take on the name Werda Verda, meaning the Warriors of Shadow. This was a small victory, as the Zell eventually drove the Taung off the planet. The homeless Taung found a new world, a planet in the Outer Rim called Rune. It was in the Cloak of the Sith, a region of the Outer Rim difficult to navigate. This world had an asteroid belt and was tidally locked, similar to Ryloth. They lived on Rune until 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, when their leader, Mandalore I, led his people to a new world which they conquered, and there they named the planet Mandalore after their great leader. They slew the mythosaurs that had dominated the surface of their new homeworld, leaving their bones to rot in the sun. Winters on North Mandalore were cold, and saw lots of snowfall. Keldabe served as the capital for Mandalore since at least 3,960 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Taung. The Taungs, an ancient humanoid simian species from Coruscant, they had gray skin and stood around 2 meters tall. Theirs was a culture of war, as from a young age they were warriors. Battle gained them honor for themselves and their gods. They fought their rivals, the battalions of Zell, waging war for hundreds of years. Due to a volcano erupting, spewing ash, causing the sun to be covered, they took the name Warriors of the Shadow, and beat the Zell in a battle. But the Zell ultimately drove them off-world. The Taung found a new world in Rune, and they lived there for millennia until their great and legendary leader, Mandalore I, led the Taungs to conquer a new world to call home. In his honor, they named it Mandalore, and they, the Taungs, became the Mandalorians, or in their language, Mando Ade, sons and daughters of Mandalore. They went abroad conquering worlds near their home. Nomadic in nature, this and their love of war drove the Mandalorians to crusade and increase their territory. Later, their current leader, Mandalore the Indomitable, began allowing other species into their warrior culture, leading to a change in what a Mandalorian was. Then, during the Mandalorian Wars, Mandalore the Ultimate took letting other species into Mandalorian culture to a new level. He needed anyone who was willing and able, as he was warring with the Galactic Republic. The Mandalorians were blessed with early victory in the war, but when Jedi Knight Revan and his fellow Jedi who had followed him to war entered the war, they turned the tide and ended the war with the devastation of the planet Malachor V. The Taungs suffered heavy losses due to the war, and when it had ended, they were believed to have been driven to extinction, living on through the Mandalorian culture they founded, being remembered by the Mandalorians as the progenitors. Malastare. Malastare is a high-gravity world that harbors a hodgepodge of environments, from forests to wastelands to steaming pools of methane. Imported fauna thrives here, including prowling packs of Nexu and mutated Sketos. While the belligerent Dugs are Malastare's sole intelligent native species, the planet is famous as a center of pod racing, having hosted the prestigious Phobos Memorial Classic before the sport's dissolution, but home to countless illegal races since then. Malastare became a Republic world in 8000 BBY, as scouts plumbed the southern galactic quadrant searching for analogues to the Permalian trade route. A short but useful route, the Dustig Trace, connected Kath and Demos by way of Malastare, and the Dustig Pocket became a small enclave of civilization in the thicket of wild space. The Dustig Trace's absorption into the Hydean Way in 3693 BBY further bolstered Malastare's status as a trading hub. Grand colonists soon gravitated toward Malastare, and within half a millennium had usurped the native Dug to become the planet's dominant species. The two fought several wars, which the Gran inevitably won, making the Dug little more than a slave species. Representation in the Senate came exclusively from Gran politicians, and the Republic's passage of the Grand Protectorate Act circa 1000 BBY forcibly relocated all non-employed Dugs to the planet's undeveloped western continent. Some Dugs took their frustrations off-world, fighting a series of inconclusive wars against the Zehethrbra. During the Clone Wars, Malastare's Grand Senators, Ax Mo and Ask Ax, served as advisors to Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Their loyalty counted for little after the establishment of the Empire, when Malastare found itself under the jurisdiction of a human planetary governor answering to Eriadu's Moff Wilhulf Tarkin. The Yuuzhan Vong conquered the planet during their advance on the core, but spared its infrastructure in order to establish an orbital rendezvous for their battleships. It has a desert jungle methane lake terrain. It is 18,880 kilometers in diameter. It has 26 standard hours in its day and 201 standard days in its year. It has a population of about 2 billion of Dugs and Gran, and the breakdown is Gran are at 51%, Dugs 44%, humans 4%, and other species 1%. Language spoken: Dug, Gran, and Basic. Their government is an elected council, and they export shipping licenses and repulsor lift vehicles, and they import technology. Dugs are a vicious, bullying species that hail from the planet Malastare, one of the mainstay planets of the Old Republic. They inhabit the lush western continent of their homeworld, while another species known as the Gran dominate the eastern continent. In the early age of the Old Republic, Republic scouts set up an outpost on the eastern continent, as Malastare was directly along the Hydean Way trade route. In the Mid-Rim, the Gran arrived on the planet soon after establishing their settlements and beginning trade in native natural resources and produce. The Dugs did not take this well, and began a long and brutal war against the Gran. A peace was finally negotiated by the Republic, which sided with the Gran, demilitarizing the Dugs. As a result of their greater numbers, the Gran represented Malastare on the Republic Senate instead of the world's native species, leading to a long-standing antagonism between the two groups. To this day, the Gran largely consider Dugs to be nothing more than subservient laborers. Dugs' physiology puts them at the extreme fringes of humanoid. Their skin hangs loose over their skeleton, while their ears jut backward like fins, and decorative beads usually dangle from an extra flap of skin near the ears. The center of gravity for their skeletal structure is thrust so high on their short torsos that they literally walk on their upper limbs, with their lower limbs functioning for finer manipulation. This unusual physique may have developed because of the homeworld's high level of gravity. Outwardly, there are few differences between male and female dugs, who can be differentiated by a large skin flap on the male's throats, which plays a role in their mating rituals. The dug method of choosing a mate is noteworthy, hinting that there may be a reptilian ancestry to this humanoid race. During the mating season, the extra folds of skin around the male's neck inflate, displaying an underlying vibrant color. The unpaired females of the clans gather together and inspect the males, searching for one they like. A female will poke, insult, and tease the male she prefers until he responds with a loud, screeching call that deflates his ballooned neck. The pair is then considered mated, and from that moment on they will remain together. While a couple will bully and badger each other throughout their lifetime, dugs are extremely loyal to their chosen mates and will protect them and their children with passionate violence if they are insulted or attacked. Despite their physical structure, dugs can travel very quickly across land, and they can also move swiftly through trees by leaping and swinging. Their reflexes are exceptionally quick, and many members of their species are experts at pod racing, a dangerous sport that has been illegal in most parts of the galaxy for years. The majority of the buildings on their home planet are towers, with the interiors constructed to feature open platforms. Most other species find their architecture impassable. Although the dugs are a technologically advanced species, erecting these buildings and other complex structures, many still prefer to live in treethorps, primitive villages set deep in the unsettled wilderness of Malastare. Dugs are perhaps best known for their foul temperaments, as they are insulting and insolent, and can become violent when crossed. They have been to war with many other species, among them the Gran and the Zehethbra, a species with colonies in the Malastare system. As previously noted, the Republic called for the Dugs to disarm as a result of their war with the Gran, leaving them extremely bitter. They consider themselves warriors, and being without armaments may have made them even more vicious and brutal. As a species, they are known to harbor grudges for years and even decades. Often, grudges will be upheld by later generations of the same family. We can hypothesize that the perceived slight in being ordered to disarm is considered by the Dug as worthy of a grudge not against an individual but against the government as a whole. As they are resourceful, they still constructed and carried out their own weapons for personal protection, the most notable of which is the Beheada, a scooped-bladed weapon meant for use while hanging in trees. In the hands of a Dug, the Beheada is particularly deadly. Sociologists have theorized that the Dug's insolent attitude is based in self-pity and insecurity, and that they mask this by trying to improve their status among their peers. Each Dug claims either a real or imagined hero or patriot in his or her ancestry, and the beads they wear in their ear fins are announcements of such heritage. Dugs also increase their own egos by insulting or degrading others. Dug society is tribal, with various clans claiming territory as their own. These clans, however, are ruled by one Dug, a single king or queen who achieves his or her role through arranged combat. When the ruler dies, the heads of the various clans meet and fight for the empty ruling seat in a no-holds-barred, cheating-allowed battle. Elimination occurs through incapacitation or death. Dug leaders who are past the age of 50 may not participate, but they can appoint someone to fight in their stead. This regulation hopefully allows the new leader to rule for a long time. Once selected, the new ruler is treated with great respect and honor, and is usually the only member of the species who will not receive insults from the other Dugs. Assassination and coups are surprisingly rare, most likely because while they are belligerent and grandstanding amid other species, among their own the Dugs recognize their betters. Dugs are not remarkable galactic explorers, with many actually preferring to remain on Malastare among their own kind. Because of their experience with the Gran, they are xenophobic, or rather, simply bigoted against other beings. If they are seen in galactic society at all, they are usually in groups of their own, and other species avoid their presence. Frequently, these Dugs are criminals or risk-takers, simply out to increase their status among their own by degrading other races through thievery and swindling. Unfortunately, Malastare has never regained the level of galactic prominence it enjoyed as a center of pod racing during the years of the Old Republic. Although the planet was conquered by the Yuuzhan Vong, it suffered little damage other than the destruction of its industrial base. Some small-scale rebuilding has taken place, such as the re-establishment of methane farms in the Malastare Wastes, which provide a small but steady income for the planet's citizens. This has allowed the Dugs to begin their recovery largely unaided by the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, while official attention has been directed toward worlds where more was lost or rendered uninhabitable. Malastare has sent representatives to the GFFA, but both the native Dugs and the resident Gran remain slightly resentful at their planet's perceived lack of attention by the Galactic Alliance.
Is here. We are being held hostage. They are watching us. 10th level. Thousands of battle droids.
Utapau. Utapau is a lonely outpost in the Outer Rim, stuck between major hyperlanes in a quiet eddy that guarantees its isolation. From above, it appears to be a lifeless wasteland of dust and scrub, but the deep shafts that hold the planetary crust provide rich, vertical habitats. Two intelligent species share Utapau. The lanky Pau'ans administer the port facilities and dominate local government. Their longevity has given them the nickname of Ancients. The bug-eyed Utai are called Shorts for their small stature and commonly work as stable wranglers, windmill operators, and in other hands-on professions required to keep Utapau running. Formerly separated by geography, the two societies integrated when surface hyperwinds forced the Pau'ans to seek deep cover. The walls of the inhabited sinkholes are now studded with residential structures, landing pads, and power stations, all exhibiting an occasional jarring blend of Utai and Pau'an architectural styles. The surface of Utapau is bone dry. All water is locked in an underground ocean stretching from pole to pole. The subterranean spaces carved by this mass of water are responsible for creating the surface sinkholes, as well as vast caverns of exposed ore. Animals exist on every elevation of the ecological column, from deep-dwelling aquatic nos monsters to long-winged dactylians that ride the thermals, with lizard-like varactals scampering up and down the walls. The capital of Utapau, Pau City, is the home of Booper Torkil Abbey Devices, which manufactures the Porax 38 starfighter for the Utapauan Skyforce. But the inhabitants have always preferred neutrality to fighting, and stayed out of the Clone Wars until General Grievous moved the Separatist Council there. Pau City Port Administrator Tion Medon welcomed Obi-Wan Kenobi's clone forces, and Utapauan warriors helped them unseat the Separatist presence. But the Republic troops quickly became an occupying army. It would later be revealed that Palpatine established one of his secret storehouses on the planet. Medon and his successors answered first to an Imperial Moff, and then later to the humans of the Fey family. After the Battle of Endor, a newly freed Utapau joined the New Republic. Utapau has a diameter of 12,900 kilometers. It has 27 standard hours in its day and 351 standard days in its year. It has a population of 95 million, comprised of Pau'ans and Utai, and the mix is 70% Utai and 30% Pau'an. Language spoke, Pau'an, Utai, and Basic. They have a corporate government. They export ore and starships and import foodstuffs and technology. And now, the Utai and the Pau'ans. Utapauans is a name for two species that inhabit the world of Utapau, a barren world of rocks and deep sinkholes located in the remote Teraba sector of the Outer Rim. The Pau'ans are the upper class of Utapauan society, making up nearly a third of the world's native inhabitants. This species is the taller of the two, with slim builds, gaunt, gray-lined faces, and dark eyes. Dressed in tightly bound, thick clothing, usually only their hands and faces are visible, they serve as governmental administrators, officials, and bureaucrats. Their neighbor species, the Utai, meanwhile, are short and stocky, with round faces and long eye stalks. The Utai serve as the menial laborers, technicians, and ground crew for docking areas. On each foot, they have only 2 toes, and on each hand, 3 fingers and a thumb. But nevertheless, they are nimble and dexterous, completing complex manual tasks with ease. Their large dark eyes allow them to see in the dimmest of light underground. The Pau'ans are a very long-lived species and are often called the Ancients because of their longevity. While they originally made their home on the surface of Utapau, climatic changes caused stronger and stronger hyperwind storms, so they were forced to build a new home in the sinkholes where they first met their native neighbors. The Utai, in contrast, are often called the Shorts because of their stature, but also because, comparatively, their lives aren't very long. Utai colonized the walls and crevices of Utapau long before the Pau'ans ever thought of doing so, and while they are not as long-lived, they are the older of the 2 species. Between the efforts of the 2 species, entire cities were built beneath the surface of the planet in the tunnels, crevices, and walls of massive sinkholes. Because of their environment, both species prefer darkness, and Pau'ans in particular prefer to eat meat raw rather than cooked. The Pau'ans govern Utapau in a way that allows for a great deal of autonomy among the local cities. Local administrators, called Masters of Port Administration, act as a type of mayor of their city, and they are assisted by an advisory committee. Each of these individual port administrators is a member of the Utapauan Committee, which is managed by the chairman of Utapau, the planetary head of state. As only Pau'ans have these leadership roles, they often serve in them for many years because of their long lifespan. They receive their positions because of their heritage, with family lines holding on to leadership roles through generations. For example, Tion Medon was an administrator for Pau City, and he was descended from Timon Medon, who first unified the Utapauan peoples. When the Pau'ans first met their fellow residents, they taught their diminutive cousins how to generate wind power. Over time, the Pau'ans found themselves falling naturally into the leadership role, a role the Utai easily and readily relinquished. Although the balance of power is tipped in favor of the Pau'ans, there is no ill will on the part of the Utai. Even though they are regulated to menial or lower-level labor positions, they are not maltreated or underappreciated by their compatriots. But, while there is no conflict between the species, there is some conflict among cities as a whole. Each city on Utapau has its own Pau'an dialect and culture, and rivalry has often been fierce among them. Arguments and competitions have erupted in the politics of the Utapauan Committee on many occasions, though the competing cities always band together to face a worldwide threat. Such cooperation occurred when the Confederacy of Independent Systems laid siege to the Utapauan homeworld during the Clone Wars. The Utapauan Committee was not at all happy with its plight, and did not like harboring General Grievous, the commander of the Separatists' massive droid army. Committee members quickly and quietly agreed that they would turn him over as soon as the opportunity arose, and when Obi-Wan Kenobi came to Utapau to investigate the situation there, they immediately told him of their situation despite being watched by their overseers. Obi-Wan told them they would be liberated by Republic forces, but sadly Palpatine took control as Emperor and put into play the programming he installed in his clone warriors to wipe out the droid army, but take control of Utapau at the same time. While the Emperor reigned, Utapau remained a dominated world held in bondage to Imperial forces. When the New Republic came to power, the planet eagerly joined the new government, hoping to make a more active role in galactic society in order to prevent such a political travesty from ever happening again to their world. Mustafar, World of Fire. It's famous as the site where Darth Vader, formerly the Jedi hero Anakin Skywalker, suffered the injuries that transformed him into an armored cyborg. Located on the Rima offshoot known as the Tossed Spur, Mustafar once orbited the gas giant Jestafad and had a surface vital and green. The Jedi Order established a training center there circa 5,300 years before the Battle of Yavin, in the thick of what was then wild space. Master Chudon Gar served among the Academy's luminaries, and his mastery of the Force ran so deep he could alter the molecular structure of matter. An attack by the Sith in 3996 BB transformed Mustafar. The gas giant, Lafrani, tugged out of its orbit by a dark side weapon, entered into a gravitational dedente with Jestafad, with Mustafar caught in the middle. Its tidal stresses roiled the world's molten core, inundating the crust with lava and flame. All surface life died, leaving Mustafar to the lava fleas, Joenko beasts, and insectile humanoids that lived underground. The Mustafarians, who now ruled the hellish orb separated by breed. The spindly northern Mustafarians gravitated toward the upper pole, while the squat southern variety remained near the equatorial magma seams. The Techno-Union claimed Mustafar in 300 BBY, recognizing an opportunity to collect rare ores in liquid form without constructing deep-bore mines. Processing plants sprang up near the lava rivers, with droids and native Mustafarians scooping minerals from the top of the melt with buckets. During the Clone Wars, Darth Sidious hired the bounty hunter Cad Bane to kidnap Force-sensitive children and take them to a secret facility on Mustafar, where Sidious hoped to surgically alter the children to create a core of Force-using spies. Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano discovered the plan, and the facility was destroyed, but Sidious didn't forget the molten world. In 19 BBY, he relocated the Separatist Council to Mustafar for their ostensible safety, only to unleash Darth Vader on their hiding place. Vader left no survivors, then clashed with Obi-Wan Kenobi in a lightsaber duel that left Vader crippled and near death. Now a possession of the Empire, Mustafar became one of many resource-rich worlds deeded to the Mining Guild. It saw renewed conflict after the Battle of Yavin, when a Force manifestation drew adventurers to the world to fight a localized dark side disturbance. It has a diameter of 4,200 kilometers. It has 36 standard hours in its day and 412 standard days in its year. The population is 20,000, made up of Mustafarians. The species mix is Mustafarians at 95%, Skakoans 3%, and 2% other. The language spoken is Mustafarian. They have a corporate government. They export processed ores and import foodstuffs, water, and technology. Mustafarian. The title, Mustafarian, applies to two subspecies of the same genus native to the planet Mustafar in the Outer Rim, a world of molten lava rivers, active volcanoes, and jagged rocky land masses. Both subspecies are hard-shelled arthropods with large insectoid eyes and long snouts, and evolved in the cooled underground tunnels of their world. Their chitinous exoskeletons lie in plates over their leathery skin, protecting them from the intense heat that they encounter day by day on Mustafar. Unlike most life forms, Mustafarians have little water in their bodies. Mustafar's volcanic environment is caused by the gravitational pull of two nearby gas giants, Jestafad and Lafrani. While Mustafar could serve as a moon for either star, it stays in its own orbit, traveling closer to Jestafad while at the same time being pulled on by Lafrani, with all three planetary bodies navigating the star system at a similar rate. Flourishing in this tumultuous environment, the taller northern Mustafarians are the physically weaker of the two subspecies. Because their bodies are more prone to frailty, the northern Mustafarians, who serve as sentries or security forces, often have their limbs enhanced with mechanical prosthetics to increase their strength, speed, and endurance. Northern Mustafarians ride insects called Mustafar lava fleas, which they domesticated as mounts in order to move quickly from one cooled lava landmass to another. The lava fleas are large, six-legged insects capable of walking across the cooler surfaces of hardened lava, and they can leap over the flowing lava rivers with ease. The smaller southern Mustafarians, meanwhile, are more sturdy and hardy. Working on cooperation with their genetic cousins, they handle most of the heavy lifting, or physically demanding jobs, in Mustafar's expensive lava mining operations. This shorter subspecies can withstand higher temperatures than the northern Mustafarians, and since they spend more time on the surface than their compatriots do, They wear armor and breath masks to protect themselves from the intense heat. The Southerners handle the harvesting platforms, skimming the surface of the lava rivers for metals with large pole-mounted cauldrons. Mustafarians are a self-involved, egocentric people always bent on improving the limited life on their world. They are technologically savvy and somewhat creative in that they have managed to find many unique ways to market the products they mine from Mustafar. Even so, their only reason for interacting with outsiders is to trade for new life-improving materials. They care little for any other people besides their own. While Mustafarians are not naturally aggressive, like most species, they have developed weaponry to protect themselves. Since their skin and exoskeletons defend them from heat-producing weapons, such as blasters, the weapons they use fire bolts of kinetic energy. Both vessels and people who are armored to guard themselves against blaster fire would find themselves vulnerable to such unique armaments. Mustafarians live and work in saucer-shaped buildings near their mine entrances. The structures are constructed to extend several levels below ground, often utilizing empty mines that no longer produce ore. They also dwell in the cooler hollows of dormant volcanic mountains. The atmosphere on Mustafar is not very hospitable to living beings, and it is a testament to the creatures and animals native to the planet that they have managed to survive. Filled with smoke, ash, and bits of volcanic rock and glass, the air on Mustafar makes drawing every breath a chore for most humanoids. As mentioned, the Mustafarians had no initial interest in life off their world. But when the Techno-Union became fixated on the idea of mining their lava for precious metals, the Mustafarians agreed to help build and manage the operations on Mustafar. This gave them membership in the Confederation of Independent Systems, though their planet was relatively untouched by the Clone Wars. Techno-Union technology offered the Mustafarians extra protection from the heat, and improved their standard of living drastically. One such item used by workers is a Kubazian skirt equipped with a cooling backpack turbine. And yet, despite some of these helpful devices created by other species, the Mustafarians remain fairly uninterested in larger galactic affairs and are perfectly happy to work on their own world in peace. The separatist movement under Count Dooku used Mustafar as one of its main headquarters for operations. As the Clone Wars raged, the Separatist Council enlisted the Mustafarians to build a stronghold on their planet to be used as a protective retreat in the event that the Republic prevailed. The fortress was near impenetrable, bearing the combined protection of Mustafar's dangerous environment with a powerful tractor beam and ray shielding. The Mustafarians were indifferent to the Separatists' politicking and helped construct the climate-controlled fortress in the hope that it would someday fall under their control. Their work paid off when Darth Vader slaughtered the Separatists along with the Techno-Union leaders on Mustafar, leaving the planet and its people to manage their own affairs. As the Empire rose to power, however, the Mustafarians had to deal with a new problem. The renegade Geonosian separatist Gizor Delso holed himself up in the fortress, refusing to surrender to the Empire. Delzo managed to get a hidden droid factory on Mustafar up and running again, and began generating a series of fresh battle droids that he intended to use as his own army. The 501st Legion of Stormtroopers was dispatched to Mustafar, and both Delzo and his battle droids were eradicated. It is believed that both fortress and factory were decimated by Star Destroyers in a subsequent orbital strike.
Than Imperial records would indicate.
A Jedi's hand is at work.
Felucia's forests have an almost hallucinogenic quality. The larger-than-life flora is gooily translucent and saturated with every rainbow hue in the visible spectrum. The planet's wild fungus growth and hives of flesh-ravaging bacteria have never been tamed in tens of millennia of on-again, off-again colonization. Felucia's riotous plant life eschews green trees for house-sized pitchers, phosphorescent lichens, explosive spore shooters, toxic puffballs, and carnivorous blossoms that hunt prey with sticky, honey-dripping tendrils. Its greenhouse atmosphere smells of sweet nectar and rot. Felucia's animals are even odder, often composed of a see-through boneless musculature that makes them resemble dollops of gelatin. Slugs, including the giant gelagrub, leave slick trails beneath the mushroom cap canopy. Tube worms thrash about in the hot lagoons, and small prism-bodied avians hunt for airborne seeds. Felucia received visitors as far back as 27,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, in the form of the Gossam Kurivers, a group of early explorers using the long-forgotten tumble drive. Claimed as Gossam land, Felucia played host to a number of Gossam colonies over the millennia, most often finding success as an exotic resort. Today, two different intelligent species bear the name Felucians. One arose from the jungles, but these force-attuned Felucians, called jungle Felucians, largely keep to themselves. The other arose off-world and is related to the Gossams. They settled into lives as farmers and traders. The Gossam colonists coexisted with their off-world cousins, but their settlements were overtaken by the plants or besieged by the jungle Felucians. In the years before the Clone Wars, a healing herb called Nisilim became a valuable crop grown on large farms, while cities such as Quay Tiao and Niango sheltered millions of colonists. The Commerce Guild established its headquarters on Felucia, making it a target during the Clone Wars and a member, alongside Mygeeto and Seleucami, of what Supreme Chancellor Palpatine called a triad of evil. Republic forces chased Commerce Guild President Shu Mai from Felucia, prompting her to trigger a failsafe that poisoned the planet's water supply. The planet has a diameter of 9,100 kilometers. It has 34 standard hours in its day and 231 days in its year. It has a population of 425 million Felucians. The species mix is 70% Felucian, 20% Gossam, 10% other, and an unknown number of jungle Felucians. Languages spoke: Basic, Felucian, Gossam. They have a corporate government. They export exotic botanicals and import foodstuffs, high technology, and fuel. Felucians, sometimes referred to as jungle Felucians, to differentiate from the farming Felucians. These were native to Felucia, unlike the other Felucians. These strange sentients had two sets of arms. The smaller arm split off of the main arm at about the elbow, and the arm ended with 4 webbed digits. The main arm had 3 dexterous fingers to grip items with. A vast quantity of tendrils sat atop their heads. They did have a natural affinity for the Force, which led to them being in tune with Felucia's balance of the Force. Lacking advanced technology, they lived a rather primitive lifestyle that differed from other similar primitive species. The Felucians were part of a single tribe rather than multiple tribes, like other alien races across the galaxy. They divided themselves via a class stratification, like chieftains, shamans, and warriors. The warriors handled the hunting and protecting of the tribe. Shamans were the strongest in the Force, mentoring the tribe and serving as spiritual guides. They also ensured all of their fallen kin that fell to the dark side were fed to the Sarlacc in the ancient abyss, a sacred place to them. The chieftains led their people using staffs and shields hardened with the aid of the Force. Due to their affinity with the Force, they were able to domesticate the Rancors and use them for their devices. In 27,000 BB, Gossam colonists found Felucia, leading to them to claim the planet as their own, which caused the Felucians to go deeper into the jungle. The planet dealt with many battles during the Clone Wars, and the Felucians gave sanctuary to Jedi Master Shaak Ti and her Padawan, Maris Brood. Eventually, though, Starkiller arrived and fought the Togruta Jedi. She died. Brood fled into the jungle and fell to the dark side, corrupting the Felucians. At this time, the Empire also began a crusade to eradicate the Force-sensitive species. Senator Bail Organa was captured on Felucia and rescued by Starkiller, and he defeated Maris, letting her live as long as she turned away from the dark side and left Felucia. Ghent, located in the Ugnaughts system of Ugnaughts sector in the Outer Rim, home to the porcine race called Ugnaughts. The planet was covered by volcanoes and swampland. Ugnaughts lived in primitive colonies, and the planet frequently was visited by slavers. 3 tribes were taken to Bespin to work the Tabana gas mines, and Ghent was even home to a Sith academy that trained Sith warriors and marauders. General Grievous, during the Clone Wars, took over the planet and took porcine slaves, and later they were also enslaved by the Empire. Post the Battle of Endor, Ghent had less Ugnaughts than other places in the galaxy. It had 22 hours a day and 200 days in its year. The species on it were Ugnaughts and humans. Languages spoken, Ugnaught and Basic. They had a tribal council government and a population of just over 1 million. They imported foodstuffs and exported Ugnaught labor. Ugnaughts are small porcine humanoids known for their tireless work ethic. They are especially good mine workers, whether this be gas or mineral mining. Their short, stocky, muscular bodies are able to withstand long periods of work under harsh conditions. This species is native to the planet Ghent, located in the Ugnaughts system, although very few, if any, remain on that world. Unfortunately, the Ugnaughts suffered the fate of many other primitive species throughout the galaxy, in that entire tribes of the pig-like aliens were gathered by human merchants, smugglers, and traders, and taken to new worlds to live and work as indentured servants and slaves. One of the largest populations of these creatures can be found at Cloud City on Bespin. When the Corellian eccentric Lord Fig decided to build this floating Tabana gas mine colony high in Bespin's atmosphere, he knew the project would require cheap manual labor. Fig rounded up by force 3 Ugnaught tribes, the Erden, Botret, and Isid, and took them to a space station near Bespin to offer them a deal. If they would build his floating city, he would then grant them their freedom. Further, they and their descendants would be allowed to live and work in the colony and share in the company's profits. The Ugnaughts accepted and went right to work on Fig's project. After the city was finished, they began to reap the profits of their labor. When Lando Calrissian became the legal administrator of Bespin, he honored the agreement with the Ugnaughts until he lost control of the facility to the Empire. With the onset of Imperial occupation, the Ugnaughts were enslaved once more and forced to work longer hours under harsh conditions. Many were removed from the facility altogether. Lando eventually returned to Bespin, and with the help of Luke Skywalker, Lando's friend Lilbot, and the Ugnaughts, he regained control of the city. He later turned control over to the Ugnaughts' chosen leader of all the tribes, King Oz. Today, they own the city they helped build. Although now modernized, the Ugnaught people retained the rich oral tradition they have long maintained. Even after being transplanted to countless new worlds, they have held on to many of the customs and laws they established in the time before their enslavement. Immediately upon their acceptance of Fig's offers, tribes re-established their ruling councils called the Terend, elected officers called Uflor, and chose traditional blood professions. Blood professions are vocations passed down from generation to generation within each family. A miner will teach his children to mine, and a mechanic teaches his children to repair and construct machinery. When Ugnaughts reach the age of 20, they become candidates for their inherited profession. If the number of new candidates for any given profession exceeds the community's needs, the candidates call a blood duel. Through a series of fights to the death, young Ugnaughts battle for the right to inherit their blood profession. A similar ritual takes place when a young male Ugnaught wishes to take a bride. All males who wish to be considered for marriage will come together once a year to meet the females who are considered eligible for marriage. If a conflict ensues over one female, the contesting males must compete against each other, with the female choosing the means of competition. Sometimes this is a contest of physical strength, but other times it is a match of wits. Either way, the ruler acts as judge in the single bout to determine who will take the bride home with him. Despite these arcane traditions, Ugnaughts are a predominantly non-violent, peaceful species. They tend to shy away from contact with other races, and usually do not learn to speak Basic, though they do understand it, except for the Uflor and members of the Terrand. Ugnaughts feel more comfortable when dealing with members of their own tribes. Ugnaughts are robust, meticulous, skillful, and unpretentious. They are thoroughly committed to their family and their occupations. Ugnaughts who are idle are usually restless and irritable. The best way to keep them happy is to keep them busy. Of the 3 tribes on Bespin, the Ised has encountered the most difficulty with outsiders and with the other tribes. This is because they have a vicious sense of humor and are prone to playing potentially dangerous practical jokes. During their indentured servant years, a majority of the Ugnaughts lived in the Bespin mining quarters. Once the city was liberated, the Ugnaughts inhabited all portions of the facility. However, council meetings, folk storytelling, dances, and blood duels still take place in various arenas located by tradition in the mining quarters area. And while the king of the tribes meets with the Terrans of the tribes in the administrative levels of Cloud City, his coronation and all other special government events are held in this same area as a reminder of the Ugnaughts' proud tradition as menial laborers. Selonia, located in the Karelian system, this oceanic world was one of the 5 brothers, the others being Karelia, Dral, and the twin worlds of Talus and Tralus. Despite being a water world, Selonia was quite industrialized, mainly making vessels fit for local space, in orbital shipyards. To get around the water, the Selonians dug miles and miles of tunnels under the planetary surface, connecting all the Selonian dens. There was a volcanic range of mountains, known to the natives as the Cloudland Peaks, as the peaks were obscured. The water world was not too far from Karelia, so it was easily identified amongst the many stars on Karelia. Selonia has a diameter of 14,033 kilometers. It has 26 hours in its day and 355 days in a year. Selonians and a small mix of Chalactan, Duros, Ithorian, Mandalorians, Selkath, Rhodians, and Celestins populate this world. The language spoken there is Mandaba. It has a population of about 16 million, 99% of which are Selonian, and, the various other species make up 1%. They export Selonian marble. Selonians. This carnivorous furred species stood upon 2 legs, and they were quite tall, ranging from 1.8 to 2.2 meters, with the females being capable of even greater heights. While on Selonia, they went sans clothing, but abroad they donned fitting attire wherever they went. A half-meter tail balanced their bodies when standing erect. It even could serve as a blunt weapon in combat. Clawed and possessing excellent vision in the dark, Selonians were a formidable lot. They could live 75 plus years, and the bulk of the population were infertile females. About 1% of Selonians were male, and 0.2% were fertile females. The Selonians were a firm believer in the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Selonians were similar to insectile species, as they had more of a hive-like mentality. You had a den which was a single fertile female, who was the queen or den mother, a brace of fertile males, and a host of infertile females. There were septs who were sired from the same male, and thus looked identical to each other. Fertile Selonians weren't highly respected, viewed similarly as breeding stock by the Selonians. There formed an overden who were in charge of the whole planet. Despite seeming primitive, these space otters were quite tech-savvy. Female warriors were the norm, and they crafted their own glaives in a manner reminiscent of how Jedi crafted their sabers. Most Selonians, while not exactly xenophobic, weren't the biggest fans of non-Selonians, but there were a few factions of Selonians who practiced alien hate. the Overden, the Sicorian Triad, and the Absolutists. Mandaba, their language was called, both spoken and written. Selonia was spared imperial domination due to them keeping to themselves, but the destruction of Alderaan and the rebel victories in the Civil War, including at Endor, inspired Selonia to join the rebellion. During the Corellian crisis, Selonia was heavily affected, along with the other planets in the Corellian sector.
In league with the wicked Count Dooku. More and more planets slip.
Mon Calamari. From space, the placid blue of Mon Calamari is an oasis of oceanic calm, yet the planet has a history of remarkable turmoil. Even its name is in dispute. Official star logs list it as Mon Calamari, while its natives prefer to call it Dak. Its seas roil with life, from vast algal swords to schools of razor-toothed krakonas. While the planet is known for its two intelligent species, the goggle-eyed Mon Calamari and the tentacle-faced Quarren, in truth it boasts several more, including the cetacean Walladons and the hive-minded jellies known as Moappa. Only island chains break the surface of the shallow oceans, with most of the 27.5 billion inhabitants living in floating megalopolises, Coral City, Foam Wander, or pressurized bases on the seafloor, Aquarius, Coral Depths. The planet's troubles date back to prehistory, when the Mon Calamari and Quarren civilizations arose from the surf. The Mon Cals established a reputation as amiable consensus builders, while the Quarren filled the role of paranoid recluses. Though the two species inhabited dissimilar ecological niches, Mon Cals near the water's surface, Quarren in the depths, the two inevitably collided in armed conflict. Resentful segregation took the place of combat following first contact with the Republic in 4,166 years before the Battle of Yavin, though civil war has occasionally flared up since. During the Clone Wars, the galactic dynamic of Republic versus Separatists provided an excuse for Mon Calamari to split along its own factional lines, with the Calamarian Council supporting Coruscant and the Quarren Isolation League pledging its allegiance to Count Dooku. After the rise of the Empire, Mon Calamari became an imperial possession. With both Mon Cals and Quarren doomed to live out their lives as imperial slaves, a resistance movement took shape, eventually driving the Empire out of Mon Calamari space entirely. The Mon Cals, and their top commander Admiral Akbar, began supporting the Alliance, even leading some to label them the soul of the rebellion. The Quarren feared that the Mon Cal's latest round of activism would bring further ruin to their planet. They found their fears proven correct in 10 ABY, when the world devastators of the resurrected Emperor obliterated several floating cities, killing millions. 1 year later, Imperial Admiral Dalla destroyed another city with a Star Destroyer bombardment. The recovering planet has since remained off the galactic stage, except for its role as temporary capital of the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances during the Yuuzhan Vong War. The seas long ago swallowed all outward signs of battle damage, and Mon Calamari's cerulean sphere remains as inviting today as it was at the time of its discovery, more than 150 generations ago. It has a diameter of 11,030 kilometers, 21 hours in its day, and 398 local days in its year. It has a population of over 27 billion, made up of Mon Calamari and Quarren, and it's about 60% Quarren, 39% Mon Calamari, and 1% other. Languages spoken: Mon Calamarian, Quarrenese, and Basic. They have a government of a representative council. They export seafood, high-tech, starships, and weapons, and they import foodstuffs, medicine, and technology. The amphibious Quarren share the outer rim world of Mon Calamari, Dak in their native tongue, with the forward-thinking Mon Calamari species. Quarren have leathery orange skin, turquoise eyes, and suction-cupped fingers. Quarren have the ability to alter their skin color, but this is done only during mating rituals. Since 4 tentacles sprout from the lower half of their faces, they have earned the not-so-flattering nickname of squid heads, by which they are known to outsiders. While the Mon Calamari are dreamers and idealists, the Quarren are more practical and conservative. They've made a place for themselves in the galaxy, acting as accountants and business managers. Despite this, not many leave home, as they prefer their peaceful ocean life to the vastness of the star-studded void. The two species share a common native tongue, but because the Mon Calamari have stopped using the language almost completely in favor of Basic, the Quarren continue to speak their own language regularly unless dealing with outsiders. Relations between the Quarren and the Mon Calamari have not always been peaceful. Quarren lived at greater depths than the Mon Calamari, and for many generations they lived in completely separate and isolated communities. When the Quarren started traveling to higher levels of the oceans, they encountered the Mon Calamari and attacked their more technologically advanced neighbors. These battles proved disastrous for the Quarren, who were nearly driven to extinction. As a means of preventing unending wars between their species, the Mon Calamari attempted a daring social experiment aimed at civilizing the Quarren. During these wars, the Mon Calamari captured nearly 1 million Quarren. The Mon Calamari were reluctant to release the Quarren, fearing that they would take up arms once more, forcing the Mon Calamari to kill them in battle. Desperate for another solution, the Mon Cals removed a generation of Quarren children from their captured parents and raised them in Mon Calamari cities, educating them in philosophy, mathematics, and science. Otherwise, they made no effort to force their beliefs on the Quarren children or change their hatred of Mon Calamari. After a decade, the children were returned to their families, and the results of the experiment was readily apparent. The children exhibited new respect for the Mon Calamari. Quarren elders felt the children had been brainwashed. The children in turn perceived the elders as primitive savages. The generations no longer had anything in common. 15 years later, the children had grown to adulthood and assumed control of Quarren society, and several years after that, opened diplomatic relations with their worldmates. While this was a controversial approach on the part of the Mon Calamari, it perhaps saved the Quarren and in turn themselves. After building something of a political friendship, the Mon Calamari encouraged the Quarren to work with them in pursuing dreams of space and advanced science. The Mon Cals provided the ideas and the Quarren provided the raw materials. Together they built impressive ships for deep space, as well as impressive floating cities that dominate the oceans. These giant cities extend far below the surface of the water and serve as centers of learning, culture, and government. In contrast with the Mon Calamari, who prefer more daylight and live in the upper levels of the cities, the Quarren live in the lowest levels of the metropolis in the cool security of the deep. This fits with their cultural identity as a pragmatic people, unwilling to trust or embrace the new idea or lofty concept. Their literature reveals a people who do not dream of brighter tomorrows, but hold fast to remembered yesterdays. Thus, they feel they belong in the sea, not in space. And yet, many Quarren have followed their neighbors off-planet. Quarren are able to live on land as long as they are able to keep their skin moist. As they benefited from the discoveries and achievements of the Mon Calamari, they have grown dependent upon them. This dependency has caused friction between the two peoples, and may have promoted the Quarren to join Count Dooku and the Confederacy during the Clone Wars. Though an armistice was reached before the end of the wars and the creation of the Empire, it is believed that the Quarren betrayed their ocean compatriots the day that the Imperial fleet arrived. On that day, Mon Calamari's planetary defense systems failed to protect them from invasion. Rumors persist that the Quarren aided the Imperials by sabotaging this protective network. The Empire enslaved both the Quarren and the Mon Calamari, forcing them to work in labor camps. There, the two species found a unifying cause and cooperated in a plan of passive resistance. The Empire retaliated by destroying whole cities on Mon Calamari, filling the ocean with the blood of both species. This incited these peaceful peoples to rise up in rage. Using only primitive utensils, hand tools, and sheer will, they forced their imperial taskmasters to leave their world. Today, Quarren and Mon Calamari live in peace with each other, although there still is some lingering resentment. Persistent elements of Quarren society recall the wars against the Mon Calamari and the Mon Calamari's deceptive theft of their children. Some Quarren believed that Moncals brought havoc to their world by exploring space in the first place. Similarly, some Quarren believe the adoption of Mon Calamari as a name for their planet is one more example of the Mon Calamari species seeking its own glorification at the Quarren's expense. These Quarren do their best to enact revenge against the New Republic and the Mon Cal without bringing harm upon their own. There has been an effort by some Quarren to find another homeworld, one they would not have to share following the Battle of Mon Calamari during the New Republic era. And yet, one sign that healing is occurring between the two peoples is that more interspecies romances are being recorded, one of the better known being the relationship involving two Rogue Squadron pilots. The late Ibtisam, a Mon Calamari, and Nurin Vakil, a Quarren. When Ibtisam was killed in action, their relationship became public knowledge, leading to more openness about the two species interrelating. For many residents of Mon Calamari, this is evidence of hope for their people and their world. Uba 4. After the destruction of Uba 3 by the Jedi Order during the New Sith Wars, 1,800 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Ubes went to Uba 4, also located in the Mid-Rim Barca sector. During the New Sith Wars, the Republic bombarded all the planets in the Uba system to stop the proud Ubes from making banned weapons, including super weapons. Uba 1, 2, 4, and 5 all were irradiated and rendered nearly unlivable. Uba 3 was completely destroyed. A few Ubes survived on Uba 4, and some of those survivors were relocated to the Ubertica system. This led the Ubes to hate the Republic and the Jedi. Not all Ubes went to Ubertica. Some stayed on Uba 4. Centuries later, Uba 4 joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone War. The planet housed a droid manufacturing plant. Commander Gree of the Grand Army of the Republic dealt with virus-loaded tri-droids along with regular tri-droids on the planet. In the years of the Empire, the Ubes protected Uba 4 with those same droids. And the native species is the Ubes, and they speak Ubese. The Ubes, a graceful, near-human people, the Ubes possessed slight bodies which led some to consider them frail. Usually having fair skin and dark hair and large eyes, either green or blue, they were unable to grow any body or facial hair. When speaking, they could only achieve rasping whispers, so they used Benanil, a form of sign language. Due to centuries living on the harsh and irradiated planet, the Ubes had to use breath masks in Type 1 or breathable atmospheres. They never were without their helmet or armor off-world, so nobody knew exactly what they looked like. They cared little about other species and their laws. Nomadic in nature, they did seem loyal to other Ubes. Usually Ubes went into the occupations of mercenaries, slavers, assassins, bounty hunters, and other related occupations. True Ubes did hunt down Arak-Pudzik, which are Ubes from Ubertica. A particular nasty example of this was the true Ubes warlord, Savix, who launched a small fleet to bombard Ubertica. Not only did they hate everyone else, they especially detested Jedi, blaming them for what happened to their world centuries ago. Beginning as a peaceful culture until the galaxy found them, the Ubes quickly became obsessed with technology, and this led to an initial boon to their world. Health improved of their citizens, productivity increased, and soon they needed to colonize as the population became too much for their world. But this boom didn't last, leading factions to form where they distrusted each other. They began making their own tech and became increasingly aggressive towards their neighbors. This then led to the bombardment of the Ube system and their hatred of the Republic and the Jedi. There is a pretty famous Ubes bounty hunter, but he's only famous due to the actions of Princess Leia, and that's Bausch. He gained recognition for what Leia did with Jabba.
I
I don't know why Dooku sent you here if all you're going to do is stand around. I mean, whenever you're ready.
The Gendai. These formless mass of muscles had no bones and large fangs. The Gendai usually inhabited heavy armor made for bipedal humanoids to give them form. They possessed a bald humanoid face with two ears that resembled wings, which they usually tucked under their jawline when wearing helmets. The Gendai could take extreme injury and dismemberment as they lacked vital organs. This gave them their immortal reputation. Like some reptiles, they could regrow their lost limbs in minutes. Their nervous system was spread out through their body in millions of nerve clusters. Thus, they had exceptional reflexes and could take lots of injuries. They even could feel a human's heartbeat from 200 meters away. Due to having no heart, they pushed blood by a series of capillaries and muscular contractions. One of their few weaknesses was hibernation. If they took too many injuries at once, their body would be forced to hibernate to aid in the regeneration process. There were only two ways to permanently kill a Gendai: complete vaporization or incineration of their body, and brain damage, as their brains were the only part of their bodies that they could not fully regenerate. When the peaceful planet of the Gendai was discovered at some point after the Great Hyperspace War by the Sith Empire, the Sith were ruthless with the Gendai, nearly wiping them out. This led the surviving Gendai to leave their homeworld behind forever. They became crime lords or bounty hunters, and most suffered from psychosis due to old age. As a peaceful species, the Gendai had a saying, "Perfection of permanence," which is, all change is an illusion. This caused Gendai philosophers to preach taking an active role in anything was pointless and even detrimental. Lacking a government after their homeworld was lost, they lived a nomadic lifestyle. They were able to live for thousands of years and rarely reproduced, as birth rates among the Gendai were extremely low. The older Gendai were the violent ones, as psychosis set in as they got older. The younger ones were just philosophers, but the violent ones gave the rest of the species a bad name. Notable Gendai. The leader of the Nar Shaddaa anti-imperial resistance, known as the Flame, Locust, on Terrace, both of these were active during the Cold War, which ranged from 3,653 years before the Battle of Yavin to 3,641. Sunder, a cartel warlord, raised an army during the conquest of Mekeb. The most famous is obviously Dirge, who was active during the Clone Wars. This Gendai was insane at this point, and was insatiable in his bloodlust. He slaughtered Gungan colonists on Omadun, and he could boast the deaths of several Jedi. Manan. Located in the Pershak system, the aquatic world of Manan was home to the amphibious Selkath species. Completely covered with water, it was the only source of the medical substance known as Kulto in the entire galaxy. The ruthless Rakata controlled the aquatic world before the Republic even existed. It gained its independence when the Rakatan Infinite Empire fell. Since Kulto was so useful for the galaxy, the Selkath were able to leverage that monopoly to keep Manan neutral in galactic events. All settlements save Atto City were below the waves. There was a station built by the Republic in the Hrakt Rift to harvest Kulto to gain the resource and prevent the Sith Empire from it. This station was destroyed when a giant Phyraxan shark, allegedly the source of the Kulto and Selkath on Manan, drove the Selkath on the station mad, and they killed everyone. One of the star maps for the Starforge was found below Manan's watery depths by Revan. During the Jedi Civil War, both the Republic and the Sith Empire tried to make special deals with Manan to get better Kulto deals. The Selkath preferred to stay neutral, but when the Sith tried to overthrow their government, they were banned. When the superior Bacta supplanted Kolto, the Republic abandoned Manon and leaving the Selkath to forsake Otto City for their ancient metropolises in the depths. Manon didn't have any other interaction with the galaxy until Palpatine and his stormtroopers enslaved the Selkath during the Galactic Civil War. Through Vader's manipulation, the Order of Shasa, a force cult of Selkath, to overthrow the Imperials only to become slaves of Darth Vader. The world also had to deal with the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. It has a diameter of 14,211 kilometers, 26 hours a day, and 422 days a year. Species, you have the native Selkath, Aqualish, Gamorrean, Gran, Human, Ithorian, Nikto, Rodian, and Twi'lek. Population breakdown, 1.8 million, 80% of that is Selkath, 18% human, and 2% other. Languages spoken, Selkatha and Basic. They have a government. Their government is the Otto High Court. Imports, building materials, foodstuffs, technology, weapons, exports, clothing, Kolto, seafood, and tourism. Selkaths. Skilled at swimming, the Selkath resemble a humanoid stingray with a range of skin colors, including green, blue, or even pink. Their skin was also patterned for camouflage below Manon's waves, with cephalic lobes framing their mouths. With females, they had tendrils on the back of their heads that the males lacked. They all possessed retractable poison-tipped claws, but to use them in combat, in any form, was dishonorable and a sign of insanity. They worshipped the progenitor, which was a large female Phyraxan shark, and hailed it as the evolutionary ancestor. When the Republic formed, Manon elected to stay neutral. Manon neutrality was maintained for millennia by way of the monopoly on Kolto. They made fine distinctive vibroblades that even caught the greedy eye of Dredden the Hutt. Their language was called Selkatha, and others could learn it despite its gurgling noises. About 100 years after the Jedi Civil War, the demand for Kolto dwindled to nearly nothing. So, Manon tried to join the Republic, but they were shot down, leading the proud Selkath to withdraw from the galactic affairs. Within a century of that, they had regressed, with warlords causing mass fragmentation among the Selkath into tribes. During the Great Galactic War, 3681 BBY to 3653 BBY, Manon was raided, forcing the Selkath deep into the depths. In the time of the Cold War, 3653 BBY to 3641 BBY, the Selkath discovered an ancient hyperdrive vessel. They revived its captain. With the Clone Wars, 22 BBY to 19 BBY, there was a Selkath amongst the venerable Jedi. There was also the bounty hunter Chada Hyoki, who was hired by Dooku to force senators to vote his way. Another bounty hunter was Mantu, who participated in a competition to get the best bounty hunters to kidnap Palpatine. At the time of the Empire, Manon was an unknown world, but the Emperor remembered it and invaded it, enslaving the now primitive Selkath. They also polluted Manon's waters and destroyed the environment. Famous Selkath, Jedi Master Qual, a council member decades prior to the Jedi Civil War. Shasa founded the Order of Shasa, which trained Force-sensitive Selkath. Chada Hyoki, Dooku hired him to force the senators to vote his way. From an unknown world, the short Roonans were quite finicky, seeing even the smallest mistake as an insult. They possessed large, almond-shaped blue eyes and a wrinkled ovular head with small ears and tiny teeth. Usually they had blue, green, or gray skin. They were completely hairless. Being members of the Republic, they were represented in the Senate during the early days of the Clone Wars by Senator Edsel Bargain. Gain was the one who seconded Queen Amidala's vote of no confidence of Chancellor Valorum.
If this body is not capable of action, I suggest new leadership is needed. I move for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's leadership.
Coruscant held many temptations, none more so than the favor of influential senators. Gain fell into company with Orn Free-Taa of Ryloth, Pasel Argante of Kuriva, and Toonbuk Tora of Sci-Mirth, all of whom supported Senator Palpatine of Naboo to succeed Valorum as Supreme Chancellor. Gain's successor to the Senate, Aang, was a member of the Senate Military Oversight Committee, which dealt with military spending and oversaw the judicial forces, the planetary defense forces, and the Grand Army of the Republic. Like many other species that called the galaxy home, Roonans could be sensitive to the Force, and they allowed the Jedi to take these future Jedi. One such Roonan was Halsey. He and his Padawan, a Nautolan called Nox, were defending the Temple of Edith on the jungle world Deveron, located in the Colonies region. When the Zabrak warrior Savage Opress came on a mission from Count Dooku to eliminate all the Jedi on Deveron, Halsey and Nox were brutally killed.
I will crush you, and your terror will sustain me for another millennia!
Hailing from an unknown world, the Theelin usually had bright-colored hair and pale skin, occasionally purple or red tones, with a mottling of spots. Many hybrid Theelin possessed different features. Some had 5 fingers, horns on the side of their heads, reptilian feet, and others. The species had an unfortunate spring of bad luck. As in the tail end of the Republic, multiple mutations arose among the Theelin, such as making the species incapable of reproducing. This led to the species' extinction around 10 years after the Battle of Yavin, though it is possible a few are still around. Ironically, the best works of art of the Theelin were produced in their twilight as a species. Some, like the Empire, despised Theelin of mixed heritage, labeling them things like half-breed. An all-female religious order known as the Theelin Divas were renowned galaxy-wide and considered by many as the greatest singers. Many female Theelin were named Diva to hopefully continue the Diva order. Theelin rarity led to a greedy hut in Goda to collect Theelin slaves. Diva Funquita and Diva Shaliqua were among his slaves. Theelins were quite noticeable in a fashion sense, styling their hair into extravagant styles. Known Theelin or half-Theelins: Shug Ninx, an outlaw tech of a Theelin and human union; Stal Sant, another human-Theelin hybrid, member of the Max Rebo band; Lats Razi, a Theelin female bounty hunter, active during the Clone Wars; Diva Araquitas, female Theelin, master of ceremonies of the Priol Dana Festival on Lamur 4 in the Colonies region; Diva Funquita, a female Theelin dancer and assistant to Gardula Basadi the Elder on Tatooine; Diva Shaliqua, a female half-Theelin singer who eventually came to be owned by Jabba the Hutt; and Darth Phobos. This female Theelin was born on Korriban and became a Sith. She started a cult that worshipped her. Weequay. This world is located in the unknown regions and was the home to the Ssi-ruuk and the Twi'lek species. The planet was humid and had lots of jungle in the Selkath system of the remote Ssi-ruuk star cluster. There were spired cities throughout various parts of the jungle. They had the fragile look when compared to the world's flora. There were also volcanoes, and a large part of the world was oceanic. Some interesting locations were the volcano Mount Scarlak, the underground caves of Slath, and the residence of His Potency, the Shriftut, ruler supreme of the Ssi-ruuk. His palace of Kreenacht. The Ssi-ruuk and the Twi'lek ate the 5th lizards. 2 seats of power had the Ssi-ruvi Imperium, the Elders' Council, which was the political body, and the Conclave, the religious body. These 2 bodies often vied for control. Only His Potency the Shriftut kept the outbreak of civil war from happening. Ssi-ruuk society was divided into a caste system based on skin color. The 5 main groups were green, red, yellow, gold, and blue. It was forbidden to mate with different colored Ssi-ruuk. Green Ssi-ruuk were the workforce of the Imperium. Red individuals represented the military. Yellow scales were the technologists that created the various devices used by the Ssi-ruuk Imperium. Gold reptilians are the religious caste, and blue were the leaders and politicians of the Ssi-ruuk. There was another color, brown, which were the offspring of Ssi-ruuk from two different castes. They were left to do menial jobs, and then the Twi'lek were slaves. The Ssi-ruuk were conquerors, and they used the vile entekment, where they used living beings' souls as energy to power their various devices. Palpatine made a deal with these reptilian reprobates. They can entek millions and have several worlds if they shared their technology with him. The Ssi-ruuk did this on a small scale, and it was covered up by the Imperial leadership, blaming the attacks on the rebellion. Due to Palpatine's death, the Ssi-ruuk launched an invasion. They were defeated utterly at Bakura. The Chiss decimated the reptiles in retaliation for conquering some of their worlds. Years later, during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, the Vong used these lizards to fuel their plans, but they failed, so the Vong further decimated them, and maybe even driving them to extinction. Lwek had 32 hours in a day, with 344 days in its year. Language spoken was Ssi-ruuk. The government was a theocratic monarchy. Population of about 10 billion. They imported energy sources and exported kassa and fift. Ssi-ruuk. The New Republic first encountered the Ssi-ruuk during the conflict at Bakura, directly after the Battle of Endor. Natives of the planet Lwek in the unknown regions, Ssi-ruuk are a warlike, warm-blooded reptilian species. Adult Ssi-ruuk can range in size from 1.9 to 2.2 meters tall, and their physical strength can match that of a typical adult Wookiee. They have very strong, long, muscular tails, 3 digits on their claws, and a sharp beak containing knife-sharp teeth and talons for rending prey. They are carnivorous. Members of this species possess a keen sense of smell, made more potent by the 2 forked tongues that flicker from their nostrils. They tend to rely on smell more than on their eyes, which are extremely sensitive to light, requiring them to have 3 lids that protect each Ssi-ruuk's vision from any sudden burst of illumination. Their heightened sense of smell actually allows them to read the emotional states of their fellows through changes in scent. At the same time, it causes them to find the scent of other races distasteful. The Ssi-ruuk speak a language that is a combination of musical tweets and whistles that caused the Bakurans to nickname them fluties. Although a few Ssi-ruuk understand Basic, it is rare that any are able to speak it. Though fearsome, this race as a whole has one great fear. They shrink from battle on a personal level. Most Ssi-ruuk will not engage in combat when they are not on their own homeworld. This avoidance is based on their religious belief that if a Ssi-ruuk dies on a world not properly consecrated, his or her spirit will wander aimlessly throughout the galaxy for all eternity. Ssi-ruuk society is dictated by a rigid honor code. Ssi-ruuk believe that they are superior to all other species, due to an ancient pictograph called the Ugnaughts. According to Ssi-ruuk, other races are inferior and are no more than sustenance creatures. Ssi-ruuk society is a clan-based hierarchy, and each clan is designated by the color of their scales. The highest ranking group is the blue-scaled clan. Other clan colors are the gold scales, primarily religious, red-brown scales, military, and the green scales, workers. Most Ssi-ruuk are of the latter caste, which is the lowest caste to still receive esteem and honor. The clans strictly avoid interbreeding with one another, as the products of such unions, determined by their brown scales, are the lowest caste of all. Rare black-scaled Ssi-ruuk are trained as assassins and bodyguards for Ssi-ruuk leaders. Ssi-ruuk's coloring is obvious as they do not wear clothing, instead carrying belts with pouches for any needed items. They find other species need to cover themselves humorous. On their homeworld of Lwek, an absolute ruler called the Shriftut controls the Ssi-ruuk government. 2 councils advise this monarch, the Elders' Council and the Conclave. The Elders' Council is made of the most respected citizens of Luek. Words from an elder are considered as important as those of the monarch himself. The Conclave is a group of spiritual leaders who guide the Shrieftut in setting and enforcing laws that adhere to and complement their religion. The Ssi-ruuk initially left their home system to search for new energy resources. Since they have not developed fusion technology, used by most spacefaring races in this galaxy, they developed instead a process called entekment, wherein a living creature's life energy is drawn from the body and transferred into a droid, ship, or other piece of technology to give it power. When off-world, Ssi-ruuk use droid ships in battle to protect themselves, powered by the intect life forces of captured prisoners. At first, they intect and enslaved a race called the Twi'lek from their own homeworld. The Ssi-ruuk also use other sentients beside the Twi'lek as slaves, and all of their slaves are brainwashed through a type of mind control that completely subverts their will. This mind control can be broken, but the entekment process leads to unavoidable death. Entekment, nevertheless, is an imperfect process that leaves its victims in perpetual agony. They do not last long in a ship or other system before needing replacement. Before the Battle of Endor, the Ssi-ruuk began expanding toward Imperial space in an attempt to gain captives in sufficient numbers to power their military ships for an escalating war with the Chiss. During this time, Emperor Palpatine made contact with them. Wanting the entekment technology for himself, Palpatine secretly ceded them a number of Outer Rim systems and allowed Ssi-ruvi slave raids to go unchecked, blaming the attacks on the rebels. One of these incursions brought the Ssi-ruuk to the Imperial-controlled world of Bakura. Although the rebels had destroyed the second Death Star just the day before, they intercepted a drone ship bearing an urgent distress call from Bakura and dispatched a small battle group to assist. Working with the Imperials stationed on Bakura, the nascent alliance of free planets, forces turned back the Ssi-ruuk toward their own region of space. It would be years before the Imperial remnant and the New Republic would sign an armistice, but this joint effort marked the first time the two groups would work together to repel a common enemy. During this conflict, the Ssi-ruuk discovered that Force-using humans could exceed their expectations as a power source and could also draw life energy from other creatures to themselves, thereby expanding into entekment to have a broader area of effect. Luke Skywalker foiled a plot to capitalize on this, and afterward set out to find other Force sensitives to protect them from being exploited in such a way again. For decades, the Ssi-ruuk made no forays into Republic space, but this changed during the war against the Yuuzhan Vong. After the birth and ascension of the mutant, multicolored Twi'lek leader known as the Kirimak, the Twi'leks approached Bakura with a peace treaty, claiming to have thrown off Ssi-ruvi domination. Of course, the treaty was a Ssi-ruvi ruse to take over the planet and gain more slaves, as they had further perfected the entekment process, allowing for a life force to power a mechanical system indefinitely. With the help of the New Republic, the Ssi-ruuk were defeated again and driven back to Luek, where they came face-to-face with the Yuuzhan Vong Armada. The genuine Twi'lek emancipation movement did sign a treaty with Bakura, allying themselves for the common good. N'Zoth. A hard, bitter world, N'Zoth spawned a species that proudly waged genocide against its neighbors. It is fitting that the planet's own death was both brutal and swift. Located to the west of Coruscant in the Tharlax sector, N'Zoth and the other planets in the Kornact cluster weren't explored by the Republic until recent centuries due to the hardship of blazing the Matelos trade route. Technically, the Tharlax sector is part of the Core Worlds region, but no true Core Worlder considers its planets anything but backward bush sites in the thick of the Negs. The bone-clawed Yevetha evolved on N'Zoth, and a pitiless caste system arose with them. Without unquestioned obedience to one's superiors, the Yevetha could never stay vigilant against the Siringana and other desert predators. Without systematic executions of weaklings, the Yevetha felt they could not maintain the purity of their bloodline. The bright stars of the Kornact cluster blotted everything else from N'Zoth's night sky. And the Yevetha long believed that they were the only intelligent species in creation. In time, Yevethan solid-fuel thrust ships lifted off from the launch pads at Heriz, spreading the species throughout the cluster and encountering other, inferior beings. In Giat Nor, capital city of the 13 Yevethan planets of the Duskin League, plans for the extermination of Kornak's vermin went unfulfilled when the Empire arrived. The Imperial Navy built its secret Black 15 shipyards in orbit around N'Zoth and enslaved the Yevetha as dock workers. They rebelled 8 months after the Battle of Endor, seizing the Star Destroyers for their own. In 16 ABY, Yevethan Viceroy Nil Spar finally launched his Great Purge, attacking all non-Yevethan colonies in the cluster. The New Republic's Fifth Fleet smashed the Yevethan military in the conflict known as the Black Fleet Crisis. An angry and broken N'Zoth simmered under the New Republic's jurisdiction for a decade. In 28 ABY, the Yuuzhan Vong invaded the Kornak cluster. The Yuuzhan Vong and the Yevetha stood matched in their xenophobia and aggression, but the invaders' military vastly outclassed that of their disarmed opponents. N'Zoth fell in hours, and it is estimated that fewer than 10,000 Yevetha still exist in the galaxy. It has a diameter of 9,500 kilometers. Length of day is 28 standard hours. Its year is 354 standard days. Population, historically 700 million, currently around 7,000. The entire population is Yevethan. They speak Yevethan. They have a caste government. They do not export or import. Yevetha. The Yevetha were a highly xenophobic reptilian species from the planet N'Zoth in the Kornak cluster, an isolated collection of about 2,000 stars that has yielded very little intelligent life in its system. This species was wiped out by the Yuuzhan Vong, who saw them as a threat to their planned dominion. The Yevetha were thin, tall, bony humanoids. Males of the species had scarlet facial crests along their cheeks, jaws, and the tops of their heads. These crests swelled up when a male was spurred to violence, and their primary head crest engorged when a male was prepared to mate. The females of the species exhibited no such features. Yevetha had wide-set black eyes and retractable dew claws, one on the inside of each wrist above 6-fingered hands. Yevethan skin incorporated vestigial armor on the back of the neck and down the spine. Their brains were located in their thoraxes, behind thick bone brain cages, and a line of indentations along their temples contained fine hair cells that controlled auditory sensing. Yevetha reproduced by laying eggs in birth casks or external wombs called maranas, often kept in special climate-controlled rooms. If the children remained in these birth casks past birth, the casks were then referred to as nestings. Unborn children were fed blood, which they absorbed through the eggshell. The mother's donated blood was preferable, though the blood of any Yevetha would do. Yevethan leaders often killed underlings and fed their blood to their unborn or nesting children in the casks. The victims considered this a great honor and would often volunteer for such a death. Most male Yevetha lived day to day with the knowledge that, at any moment, a superior might kill them simply for their blood. This biological need for blood was the central focus of the Yevethan culture and religious belief system. Therefore, they were constantly bent on violence to harvest blood. They were a dutiful, attentive, cautious, but fatalistic species shaped by a strictly hierarchical culture. A viceroy, called Dorama, or the Chosen One, because of his dual role as religious and political leader, headed the Yevethan governing body called the Duskin League. He was at the top of a complex hierarchy, served by military leaders called primates and administrators called proctors. All of these obeyed him without question and would eagerly have died for him. They were ruthless fighters, unwilling to surrender even in the face of certain defeat. The Yevetha did not fear death. In their legal system, a killing was only considered murder if an inferior killed his or her superior. As mentioned above, dying to feed a superior's children was considered honorable. When Yevetha of lower standing failed in a mission or caused dishonor upon their superiors, they were called Nitaka, a word meaning dishonored. The Nitaka would kneel before their superiors and offer their necks to the superiors' dew claws, hoping to die as sacrifices to the superiors' children, re-establishing honor upon their own families as well. Until their contact with the Empire, the Yevetha believed they were the only intelligent creatures in the universe. Initially, they submitted to Imperial rule. Then, around the time of the Battle of Endor, the Empire became lax in its control. Without warning, the Yevetha rebelled violently, slaughtering every human stationed on N'Zoth, both military and civilian. They spent the next decade mastering Imperial technology, then struck out at neighboring systems to eliminate all non-Yevethan peoples in their sector. 12 years after the Battle of Endor, the Yevethan began a cleansing known as the Great Purge, wiping out all non-Yevetha within the borders of the Kornakt cluster. The New Republic sought to intervene diplomatically when Yevethan expansion threatened Republic-allied worlds, but the Yevetha attacked instead. The New Republic eventually fought them back, but it cost many thousands of lives and nearly toppled the fledgling government. As a result of their experience with the Empire, Yevethan ethnocentrism became xenophobia, causing them to consider all other intelligent life morally and physically inferior. They abhorred contact with other species and would go to extreme measures to avoid alien contamination, engaging in intense purification, bathing, and disinfecting procedures if they spent time in close quarters with outsider vermin. They found the smell of other species distasteful and claimed that without bathing or purifying themselves, they could still smell the stink of other beings on their own persons. Yevethan xenophobia was so extreme that even in the shadow of the Yuuzhan Vong, they refused aid from any other galactic species. As a New Republic squadron commander, Jaina Solo reported in her logs that the very last of the Yevetha committed suicide by crashing his starship rather than be aided by her squadron. Castle, a planet in the Perlemian trade route of the colonies. It was an industrial world, as it was a major world for the Commerce Guild. The Gossam called the planet home. Using hyperdrive technology, the Gossam Purvers colonized other worlds, including Felucia, in 27,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The world joined the Republic before 22,000 BBY. The Commerce Guild ended a war on Castle, and that allowed the guild to take over the world. Shumai rose through the ranks and was able to buy back Castle, but she demanded tribute as thanks for her efforts, still leaving the Gossam people to toil. Shumai became the Presidente of the Commerce Guild, and she joined Dooku's separatist movement and supported him in the Clone Wars. Castle fell to the Republic late in the war. After the Clone Wars, the various factories were used for the Empire's benefit, and it was one of many worlds later conquered by the Vong in the Yuuzhan Vong War. And it was also a world in the Empire of Darth Krayt. They speak Gossam and Basic there. They have a government of the Commerce Guild and a population somewhere in the range of 10 to 100 million. The Gossam. Gossams are a small saurian species native to the planet Castle in the colonies region of space, not far from the core worlds. Known for their intelligence and cunning, Gossams have green, scaly skin, wide yellow eyes, and heads that slope back on an incline, balancing their thin bodies on three-toed feet like dancers on toe point. Gossams also possess three-fingered hands that are long and graceful, and like to wear elaborate clothing with platform shoes in order to appear more impressive when encountering other sentients. Female Gossams take great pride in their hair, molding it with oil-based creams to form sweeping sculptures. The traditional female hairstyle is a wave sweeping up from the back of their heads. Like most reptiles, Gossams are hatched from eggs, which the female Gossams guard and preen over as status symbols. Being a species that is very appearance-driven, when eggs are about to be laid, Gossam families will construct elaborate nests of fancy warm fabrics and pillows to show off their progeny even before they hatch. They will also throw elaborate parties for egg viewing, wherein the eager parents receive gifts from their friends and relatives. Of course, the higher the status of the parents, the more exotic and expensive the gifts. These parties are usually thrown late in the egg's incubation period in the hope that the eggs will hatch during the event. Most Gossams are independent-minded, and yet many served as indentured servants to the Commerce Guild on Castle for a portion of their lives. This tradition came about when Castle was embroiled in a devastating economic depression. The depression became so severe and life so harsh that Gossams were slaughtering one another for necessities such as food, jobs, and passage off-world. In return for their servitude, the Commerce Guild rescued the world and the Gossams by buying vast tracts of Castle real estate and infusing their economy with large monetary investments. The world soon became a center point to the Commerce Guild's manufacturing operations, and the guild appointed a Gossam who it had saved, Shumai, as chief of property resources after she rose through the corporate ladder. Shumai had thus managed to bring this world out of its financial slump through keen business acumen and shrewd negotiation tactics. She later repurchased Castle, but raised rents and demanded tribute from her people, leading to her further advanced standing within the Commerce Guild. Shumai was ultimately chosen as the guild's president. Part of Shumai's solution to keep her people employed and fed was to offer contracts for them to serve the guild exclusively for a minimum of 10 standard years, in return for food, housing, and a modest income. Once Castle grew out of its depression, the tradition continued, with most young Gossams taking indentured contracts to gain business experience before venturing out into the corporate world on their own. Gossams who were able to amass any amount of wealth largely invested those credits in off-planet banks, not trusting their own. Many Gossams established off-world estates for recreational purposes, with a large contingent choosing to settle on Felucia and investing in local business ventures as a means of acquiring influence. Gossams are therefore some of the shrewdest business people in the known galaxy. Their products are often inexpensive to fabricate en masse and overpriced. Gossams are excellent at bartering and working an angle that benefits them in the end. Their self-centeredness and greed know no limits, scheming to beat others out of every credit they can, and often lying and cheating to obtain what they want. Their word of honor means little, and anyone who does business on a verbal agreement with them is asking for trouble, as the Gossams put no value in it. Members of this species, who are seen throughout the galaxy, can be legitimate merchants, or quite the opposite. Due to their industrial relationships with many off-world companies, most Gossams speak Basic, in addition to their own language. Many are involved in smuggling operations and piracy. Because of their size and calm demeanor, they are frequently underestimated, a perception they will always use to their advantage. However, Gossams generally do not rise to positions of power, with Shumai being one well-known exception. Their innate independence and greed seem to prohibit the long-range planning necessary to achieve true influence. Although the Gossams raised military forces to support the Confederacy of Independent Systems in the Clone Wars, they do not have much of a presence in the galaxy in post-Imperial era. Having allied themselves with the Commerce Guild and the CIS, the Gossams and their planet were a primary target of Palpatine's reign of terror against non-human species. The population was largely enslaved, and Castle's industrial base was repurposed to produce military goods for the Imperial Navy. This total societal takeover left the Gossams mostly unable to join the rebellion in any substantive numbers. Although the Gossams later gained their freedom through the rebel victory, their planet has yet to fully recover. Yuuzhan Tar, the lost world of the Yuuzhan Vong. Yuuzhan Tar was the original homeworld of the Yuuzhan Vong, a sentient extragalactic species known for their mastery of biotechnology and their fanatical devotion to their gods. Once a paradise world of living architecture and organic harmony, Yuuzhan Tar was both the cradle of their civilization and the foundation of their faith. The planet existed in another galaxy, far beyond the borders of known space, and was destroyed long before the Yuuzhan Vong invaded the Star Wars galaxy. In its prime, Yuuzhan Tar was a lush, vibrant world covered in biotech creations that lived symbiotically with their inhabitants. The planet's landscape was defined by massive coral structures, vine-growth citadels, and flesh-like terrain that pulsed with life. Every part of the planet, from the smallest organisms to the grandest structures, was alive and interconnected through a complex biological network. Oceans of organic gel nourished the world's living architecture, while skies shimmered with the bioluminescent glow of flying creatures bred to serve the needs of their masters. The Yuuzhan Vong did not build in the conventional sense. Rather, they grew their cities, their homes, and even their tools. The capital, also called Yuuzhan Tar, was both a city and a living organism, the heart of their civilization and the seat of the supreme overlord. The world of Yuuzhan Tar was inseparable from the Yuuzhan Vong religion. It was said to have been personally shaped by their gods, especially Yuuzhan, the creator god, who, according to myth, sacrificed parts of his own body to give form to the world and his children. The Yuuzhan Vong saw themselves as the divine inheritors of this living paradise, chosen to maintain the sacred balance between creation and destruction. Every act on Yuuzhan Tar was viewed through a religious lens. Agriculture, warfare, medicine, and even city planning were spiritual acts of devotion. The priests of the various godly domains, war, life, pain, and shaping, held immense influence, guiding every aspect of Yuuzhan Vong society. The planet's living systems were revered as extensions of their god's will, and even routine maintenance of organic technology carried ritual significance. The downfall of Yuuzhan Tar was a turning point in Yuuzhan Vong history. According to legend, and later rediscovered truths, the Yuuzhan Vong waged a civil war against their own creations, a race of sentient biomechanical constructs who had once lived peacefully alongside them. This catastrophic conflict, born from arrogance and the desire for domination, culminated in the planet's destruction. In the wake of their rebellion, the Force itself turned away from the Yuuzhan Vong, stripping them of their connection to it. Yuuzhan Tar was obliterated, its lush biosphere consumed by fire and ruin, leaving behind a lifeless wasteland. The survivors, filled with guilt and rage, interpreted this tragedy as divine punishment. Thus began their millennia-long pilgrimage through the void, a wandering exile that would ultimately lead them to the galaxy of Luke Skywalker and the New Republic. The Yuuzhan Vong.
Introducing Business Essentials from U.S. Bank, with no monthly maintenance fee checking and card payment processing.
It's been a scary day. There's a child that's missing.
This is about a ransom. I mean, honestly.
The Yuuzhan Vong are bipedal humans. The Yuuzhan Vong ultimately lead them to the galaxy of Luke Skywalker and the New Republic. The Yuuzhan Vong. The Yuuzhan Vong are bipedal humanoids native to Yuuzhan Tar, the parent of the sentient wandering world Zonama Sakat. Around 15,000 standard years before the Battle of Yavin, they were cut off from the Force by their world because of their violence and their manipulation of biotechnology. Angered at their world's actions, they increased their production of biotechnology, causing the death of their world. Evacuating in living vessels known as world ships, they set out to wander the stars looking for a place to call home. The Yuuzhan Vong resemble humans in many ways, but are usually taller, heavier, and have less hair on their heads. Their faces look like lumps of pulsating flesh with droopy eyes underscored by bluish eye sacs. Their foreheads are sloped, giving them a barbaric appearance magnified by the ritual tattooing and self-scarring resulting in grotesque mutilation and reshaping of the features. This type of disfiguration exemplifies a ritualized system symbolic of a path or a journey each Yuuzhan Vong must experience. In order to accomplish a rise in rank, individuals must make one more physical change to recreate themselves in the shape of one of their gods. They sacrifice a body part, an organ, or a limb to bring themselves closer to perfection, and thereby closer to their gods. They then graft other parts onto themselves, limbs from another creature, or bioengineered body parts. The Yuuzhan Vong never seem to maim themselves in any way that might hinder their ability to function, but only in ways that change their appearance or improve their abilities. Warriors, especially, are given the opportunity to replace sacrificed limbs with limbs from the bodies of their defeated foes, or with parts from particularly vicious predators, perhaps a sharp-taloned claw. Those whose changing ceremony has failed, and who are functionally maimed, are demoted to the lowest ranks of the lowest caste, mere workers or shamed ones. Everything these people do is for the greater glory of their gods. As they follow their path of conquering and dominating the galaxy, recreating it, like their own bodies in the image of their gods. Yuuzhan Vong warriors will not surrender to an enemy under any circumstances, for fear of insulting their gods. They use bioengineered weapons, tools, and ships to further their cause, and they find the use of actual machinery extraordinarily offensive. They refer to those not of the Yuuzhan Vong as infidels, and take perverse pleasure in their own pain and in the pain of others. An attack on their pride is cause for a death duel, which also can be considered a sacrifice to their gods. To die in battle is among the highest honors they can achieve. Yuuzhan Vong society is divided into regimented levels or castes, ruled by a supreme overlord. The Yuuzhan Vong people look upon the supreme overlord as a god, for if his victories become legend, he will, in their belief, become a god. It is a common belief that the supreme overlord speaks to the gods directly, so his orders are never to be questioned, only obeyed. The other castes include priests, shapers, warriors, intendants, and workers. While a person's caste is usually determined by birth, some have risen out of their assigned caste through marriage. More often, however, priests and warriors fall out of favor and end up a part of the intendant caste, or even as low as the shamed ones. Members of the priest caste are responsible for communicating the will of the gods to the people and act as advisors to the supreme overlord and the warriors. The shapers, meanwhile, create all the weapons and tools the Yuuzhan Vong use in their conquest, based upon a very stringent set of religious guidelines. Ignoring even one of these guidelines is heresy, and will engender a swift and brutal penalty. Warriors comprise the caste most frequently encountered in the galaxy. They are vicious fighters who will fight to the death with religious zeal. The highest ranked warrior is the War Master, followed by the Supreme Commander, Commander, Sub-Commander, Subaltern, and Warrior. Intendants, meanwhile, care for the Shaper's creations and maintain supply lines during an invasion. Intendants also work as spies, excelling in subterfuge and deception, tasks below the honor of a warrior. The lowest caste, the workers, perform the least desirable tasks in a military culture. They also care for the shaped creatures and harvest the equipment. Workers are made up of those born to that caste, those who've fallen from other castes, enslaved peoples, and shamed ones. Yuuzhan Vong, whose body reject the grafting on of new limbs or organs, or who are deformed. The Yuuzhan Vong considered all other sentient life forms to be inferior to themselves. Therefore, their modus operandi is to enslave or eliminate lesser beings. They consider most species unworthy of slavery, but those who fight back courageously are given a swift, merciful death. In their goal of conquest, the Yuuzhan Vong are inspired by their worship of Ugnaughts, the Slayer. It was in deference to his commandments that they extended their armies across the galaxy, led by their vanguard force, the Praetorite Vong, in the hope of bringing all other beings under their rule or destroying them. All Yuuzhan Vong weapons, equipment, tools, and clothing are bioengineered organic life forms. Their ships, for instance, are propelled by Dovin basils, living gravity well projectors, which create warps in space-time to move their ships through hyperspace. Using many Dovin basils in concert, the Yuuzhan Vong are able to even move a whole planetary body from its nestled gravitational orbit, as evidenced by the crash of the moon Debido into its planet Cernpadal. The Yuuzhan Vong are unique in that the Jedi cannot sense them through the Force. Luke Skywalker, the Yuuzhan Vong heretic shaper Nen Yim, and a Yuuzhan Vong priest named Harar, discovered that because their homeworld, Yuuzhan cut the Yuuzhan Vong off from the Force, they are completely devoid of it. As a result, they do not believe it exists, mocking those who do. In fact, Yuuzhan Vong hate Jedi more than any other galactic residents. They receive great honor for killing one. As the New Republic was beginning to take hold, scout ships reached the known galaxy and set plans in place for invasion. 25 standard years later, Yuuzhan Vong swept into the galaxy, destroying and conquering everything in their path, eventually claiming Coruscant at the galactic center. With their strange weaponry, brutal tactics, and religious zeal, they took the New Republic completely by surprise, murdering countless thousands of people and demolishing system upon system in the name of their gods. Their conquest ended at Coruscant when Zonama Sakat finally took them as her own, realizing this was the only way to end the bloodshed and teach the Yuuzhan Vong a new way to live, one that transcended pain and violence. Nal Hutta. It has a diameter of 12,150 kilometers, 87 hours in its day, 413 days in its year, has a population of around 7 billion, made up of Hutts, Vipits, Ewokai, and the breakdown is 43% Hutts, 29% humans, 15% Vipits, and 14% other. Languages spoken is Huttese, and they're governed by a clan council. They export tourism and contraband and import foodstuffs, high technology, and luxury goods. 15 millennia ago, the dominant Hutt clans fled the ruin of Varl for Evokar, a temperate world in the YouTube system. A scattering of Hutts had settled Evokar centuries before, but left the planet in the hands of its natives, the peaceful humanoid Ewokai. Now, through legal cunning and brute force, the Hutts and their Vipit servants disenfranchised and exiled the Ewokai, then leveled Evokar's rainforests to make stagnant swamps. When their work was done, the Hutts renamed their prize Nal Hutta, or Glorious Jewel in Huttese. Nal Hutta is home to the Hutt Ground Council, and every Khajiitic of note maintains estates there, vast, gloomy tracts of swampland dotted with grandiose palaces within which the Hutts scheme and plot against one another. Traditionally, only Huttese may be spoken on Nal Hutta, but in practice, the sheer number of Hutt slaves, servants, and sycophants makes such a prohibition impossible. Nonetheless, no non-Hutt ever feels entirely comfortable on Nal Hutta's dank surface. Nal Hutta sits at the nexus of 3 trade routes. The Utmian Pabul wends its way coreward past lesser Hutt worlds such as Nar Heka and Du Hutta to Quen Space Station and the Mid-Rim. Its eventual terminus is Gindyne in the expansion region. The Shag Pabal leads rimward, passing Khajiitic holdings and the famed Hutt slave markets on Rorak, on its way to a string of slave worlds. It exits Hutt space at Outland Transit Station in the Baxel sector, one of many imperial sectors dominated by the Hutts. Finally, the Pabal Hutta runs across the length of Hutt space. Few charts detail the space lanes between Selkath and Varl. Spacers' tales tell of world after world despoiled by the Hutts eons ago, vast tracts of space where nothing remains alive. But Cantina talk also may turn to the Butana Hutta, home to the unimaginably lush and opulent throne worlds where the Khajiitics stockpile their finest treasures and safeguard their deepest secrets. Hutts are large, amphibious gastropods that presently inhabit the world of Nal Hutta in the YouTube system, the center of an area of the galaxy known as Hutt space. They have thick bodies with a long, muscular tail and small arms that protrude from their upper torsos. Physiologically, the Hutts are an anomaly, sharing traits from a variety of species. Like sea mammals, Their nostrils can close, with their large lungs enabling them to stay underwater for hours at a time. Like worms, they are hermaphrodites, possessing both male and female reproductive organs. Like marsupial mammals, they bear their young one at a time and nourish them in a brood pouch during their earlier stages of development. Despite all these varied qualities, scientists generally classify Hutts as gastropods because of the way they move, slithering around like giant slugs. They have no skeleton to speak of, merely an internal mantle that supports their bodies and shapes their heads. Their mouths open so wide that they can swallow just about any small creatures whole, allowing them to frequently indulge their taste for live snacks. Hutts also possess extremely tough skin that protects them against heat and chemical burns, with their mucus and sweat making their skin surface very slippery while also keeping their bodies moist. Though hermaphroditic, the average Hutt possesses a notably healthy sexual appetite, even for members of other species. In fact, some Hutts have been known to assume male or female gender roles and pursue bigender relationships, a behavior that sociologists attribute to societal contamination from contact with bigendered species. Medical specialists disagree, deeming the alternate lifestyle a product of nature that certain Hutts simply cannot deny, given their ability to select their own genders. Whatever the reason might be, many normal Hutts consider this behavior a perversion and scorn those who choose gender roles, sometimes to the point of enacting violence and murder upon them. Hutts are among the longest-lived species in the galaxy, with a maximum lifespan of roughly 1,000 standard years. During such a lifetime, they can grow in size to more than 1,500 kilograms, and because they are so long-lived, Hutts rarely reproduce. When they do, many Hutts assume female roles in order to bear young. Infant Hutts are blind and extremely small, and they will move to a parent's pouch, where they remain for around 50 years. When they finally leave the pouch, they have matured to an intellectual level comparable to that of a typical 10-year-old human. As they move toward adulthood, they gain in corpulence, a trait considered a sign of power and prestige. Hutt culture is essentially egocentric. They consider themselves the center of the galaxy, and on the worlds they control are likened unto gods. A Hutt's success in life is comparable only to its ego, and a Hutt's ego can be tremendous. They are experts at manipulating others and getting them to do their bidding. Before inhabiting Nal Hutta, the Hutts evolved on a planet known as Varl, a temperate forest world with two suns that the species worshipped as gods. In Hutt religious beliefs, one of the sun gods, Avona, was pulled into a black hole. When this happened, the other planets in the system collided and crushed each other into numerous asteroids that bombarded the planet Varl. The second sun god, named Ardos, collapsed itself into a white dwarf out of grief over losing its mate. Hutts believed that they had actually become greater than the gods they once worshipped as a result of their surviving the destruction of their original system. There is no absolute scientific substantiation for the Hutt's religious tale. However, most scientists tend to believe another version that is told by spacers and traders throughout the galaxy. This story indicates that the Hutts destroyed their own planet in a civil war, the likes of which had not been witnessed anywhere in the known galaxy. Nal Hutta is ruled by a council containing the eldest members of the so-called clans of the ancients. These clans are families that can trace their ancestry back to their days on Varl. The means by which the council makes decisions is a mystery, in that the Hutts will not allow outsiders to observe the governmental proceedings. Hutts all over the galaxy, even those on the farthest outskirts, abide by the decisions of the council. For Hutts, blood is always thicker than slime. A Hutt's clan is paramount, particularly one's Khajiitic, or criminal family, and most decisions are based upon how they will affect the prosperity and the position of one's clan. Vast ancestral fortunes, passed on from generation to generation, have resulted in Hutt clans controlling some of the richest holdings in the galaxy. Rivalries among Khajiitics are widespread and often dangerous to those involved. Assassination as a means of achieving an end is commonplace. And although it is unforgivable, but not unheard of, for a Hutt to kill another Hutt, they would think nothing of executing an underling. The Hutts in general are not builders, manufacturers, or inventors. They are entrepreneurs, constantly connecting someone who needs something with someone else who can fulfill that need. More often than not, Hutts head up giant criminal empires that are secretive and vast, and a majority of the major illegal transactions made in the galactic business world likely have a Hutt connected to them in one way or another. Galaxy-wide, most illegal activities have a Hutt at their source, whether it be the spice trade, smuggling, gambling, or slavery. The one area in which Hutts excel and seem to take particular pride is their aptitude for slavery. Befitting their oversized egos and substantial appetites, Hutts will trade beings as easily and with as little afterthought as they would exchange nerf hides. During the Clone Wars era, Hutts controlled all the slave trade on Tatooine and Ryloth. The Hutt penchant for subjugating other species has its roots in Hutt history, starting with their enslavement of the Klatooinians, Vodrons, and Nikto through unfair trade agreements. At the end of the New Republic era, the Yuuzhan Vong destroyed Nal Hutta, forcing the Hutts to seek a new homeworld. Because several Hutts such as Jabba, Gardula, and Dekka had established bases on Tatooine over the years, it was chosen as their new primary home planet. Across these worlds and throughout these species, one truth becomes clear. The galaxy is shaped not by a single people, but by the countless civilizations that rise and fall within it, from the cunning Gossam to the disciplined Yevetha to the near-immortal Gendai and the ever-scheming Hutts. Each species leaves its mark. Some brought peace, some brought chaos, and some changed the fate of entire eras. That's why exploring them matters. Every species, every culture, every story, they all weave together to form the Star Wars galaxy we love. If you enjoyed this journey through alien life, make sure to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments which species was your favorite. And get ready for Season 3. We'll be starting with the mysterious Shistavanen, the wolf-like creatures from the Mos Eisley Cantina, coming this January. Until then, thanks for watching.